She was the only princess of the royal family. Yet now she lay tied to a bed, like merchandise awaiting trade. All because her brother had ordered her to marry a man she'd met only once. The returning war hero had just claimed victory when the king gifted him a bride. Misha Esquelier, his mute, vacant-eyed little sister, was handed over as a reward. A reward that was, in truth, a veiled insult. The girl curled up at the edge of the bed, trembling like a frightened fawn. Eric stood frozen, stunned by the sight. Had he stepped closer, he might have noticed it, the flicker of awareness hidden in those hollow eyes. The king chuckled like one playing with a pet. She's just shy. Misha, come here. The girl let out a few garbled sounds, but couldn't even form a single complete sentence. And then, out of nowhere, she tripped over her own feet, crashing hard to the floor in front of everyone. The king snorted, "My sister's health is rather delicate, that I hope you all understand. Misha, get up now." The old earl forced a smile and said, "It's an honor for our family to marry a royal." But deep down he was shaken. This frail, dazed girl was the princess? Eric stepped forward and accepted the king's decree. "I shall not bring shame to his majesty, nor to her highness." Pleased by Eric's obedience, the king chuckled. "She'll soon be your wife. Go on, say hello." His expression remained calm, completely unreadable. He stepped forward, then dropped to one knee in front of Misha. With utmost royal courtesy, he gently took her trembling hand. "It would be my honor to care for your highness," he said solemnly. But Misha suddenly yanked her hand away with force. She stumbled back, eyes wide with fear, staring at Eric as if he were a monster. The king chuckled and motioned with a finger. "Misha, he's going to be your husband. Don't be difficult. Come here." Misha bolted toward him and knelt beside the throne, clinging to it like her last refuge. The king gently stroked her golden hair, smiling. "That was rude of you, Misha. You owe him an apology." And right then, Misha dropped to all fours and barked like a dog. Eric simply watched the absurd spectacle unfold, as if he wasn't the one being forced to marry the princess. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the carriage rolled on in complete silence. His family had just returned from a long and brutal war. The king had hoped they'd bleed each other dry in battle. But they returned with overwhelming victory, a result that clearly displeased the crown. So this marriage was his way of keeping them in check. The old earl raged at the dinner table, furious at the royal insult. But Eric remained calm. Though he detested the situation, he knew royal decrees were absolute. The wedding was already set. Even if this was nothing more than a marriage forced upon him, there was no escaping it. As the young heir of House Cladner, Eric was simply doing his duty. His cousin, Eberly Cladner, hesitated before asking, "Then, what about the engagement with the Crispan family?" The old earl slammed the table. "What kind of foolish question is that? Of course it's off. That mad tyrant is out of control." What infuriated them even more, the king had sent royal maids supposedly to care for the princess, but in truth, to spy on their every move. One of the maids sneered, "Her Highness is not allowed to sleep alone." Lady Cladner held back her anger and replied patiently, "As you can see, there's a hallway separating her room from ours." But the maid scoffed, "Don't you think that's a bit distant? What if something happens during the night? His Majesty won't be pleased." Lady Cladner rubbed her temples. "Then we'll assign a trusted maid to stay with her." The maid gasped, feigning outrage. "What? You would entrust Her Highness's body to a servant?" "Oh no, the king will not like that at all." Lady Cladner had had enough. Her eyes flared with fury as she glared at the two smug, overbearing maids. Once the maids had left, Lady Cladner exploded. "What, does he expect you to personally care for the princess now? The nerve, to insult the heir of House Cladner like this." She downed a glass of red wine in one gulp, hoping to drown her rising fury. It was a night steeped in rage and sorrow, yet Eric acted no differently than usual, as if nothing had happened. Inside the estate, tension ran high, but outside the people celebrated joyfully, unaware that their noble lord was about to marry a simple-minded girl. The wedding day arrived without delay. Dressed in full regalia, Eric sat in the carriage, gazing out the window. "I bet we look just like the leads in some perfect fairy tale," he thought dryly. Then came the moment. The grand doors opened and the bride stepped into view. The hall erupted in hushed murmurs. Is she unwell? She walks like she's drunk. But no matter how the bride looked, nothing could stop this wedding from taking place. Inside the cold, sacred walls of the cathedral, Eric Kladner and Misha Esquelier exchanged their vows. The ceremonial kiss followed, mechanical, distant, and hollow. Just before entering the bridal chamber, an older maid leaned in and whispered, "Please, do not harm Her Highness tonight. That will come by tomorrow morning, to collect the proof." Eric replied flatly, "Understood." He pushed open the bedroom door. The girl lay there like a broken doll, half slumped on the bed, her eyes vacant. The room was dim, shadows creeping along the walls. Eric took slow, deliberate steps toward her. The princess didn't even flinch, not a sound, not a breath of response. Silently, he slipped off his robe. Then softly he called out, "Your Highness." Suddenly, Eric noticed something strange, empty medicine vials scattered beside the bed. He leaned in. Sedatives, the kind strong enough to bring down a horse. They gave this to someone already starving? Even enemy prisoners wouldn't be treated like this. Who would dare do something this cruel without hesitation? His jaw clenched, that he could already guess who gave the order. That despicable king. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "I'll get you out of this." Misha's body was ice cold, like it hadn't felt warmth in days. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Her ankles were bruised and swollen from the ropes. No, there was no way. She was fine. He moved to untie her wrists. Her fingers had turned deep red from the lack of circulation. That if this continued, there could be permanent damage. There was only one option left. "Your Highness," he said gently, "I'm going to get under the blanket with you. Please, don't be frightened." The man's husky voice echoed softly in the dark. "My name is Eric, son of Earl Kladner. I'm 24. I have no siblings. Though I once had a sister. She passed away when she was very young. Because of the war with the Principality of Sidit, I spent most of my life on the frontier. And today, I married you." He wasn't sure how much the princess could understand. But he felt she deserved to know what was happening. "Winters on the border are brutal," he said softly. "Frostbite always hits the fingers and toes first. That's why it's so important to keep the blood flowing." He glanced down and froze. The princess had already fallen asleep. Her pale face was slowly regaining some color. Eric rose gently, then turned to prepare what was expected of him, the evidence of their wedding night. The next morning, he handed a blood-stained sheet to the maid waiting just outside the door. Just then, a plump maid knocked, using the excuse of helping Her Highness get dressed. Eric shut the door right in her face. "She's still asleep," he said coolly. "Let her rest a little longer." Once the maid was gone, he returned to the room. As he let out a quiet sigh, a rustling sound came from behind. He turned, only to see Misha gnawing on a robe. "Your Highness, no, that's not food." Eric rushed over. Misha whimpered, her mouth full of fabric. He glanced toward the basket of untouched food. "You're hungry, aren't you? Here, try this instead." Misha let out a soft cry, dropped the robe, and reached eagerly for the food. Eric simply watched her in silence. Like a tiny woodland creature, she nibbled on the bread, one bite at a time. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "At least, you like it." Their wedding night passed quietly. The next day they returned to the Kladner estate. The Earl and his wife were already waiting at the gates. Though their stiff expressions made one thing clear, they weren't exactly thrilled to meet their new daughter-in-law. "Go get some rest," the countess said curtly. And right at that moment, Misha suddenly climbed up the front yard sculpture, like a curious little monkey. Eric quickly rushed over and scooped her down. The Earl took one look, and turned away in disgust. One of the maids reached out to take Misha, but Eric gently blocked her. "You've had a long journey. Go rest. I'll take care of her." The two royal maids exchanged a glance and gladly excused themselves. Once they were out of sight, Eric turned to the butler. "From today on, Her Highness is part of this family. She's not in good health. I expect her to be treated with extra care." Off to the side, Lady Kladner silently watched her son, her expression unreadable. During dinner, Eric spoke first. "I'll take care of Her Highness's meal. You're all dismissed." One of the taller maids chimed in carelessly. "Oh, it's fine. The princess always makes a scene when she eats. She's quite the handful." Eric's eyes darkened, the air turned heavy, but he said nothing. Does she have any favorite dishes? He asked calmly. Or anything she dislikes? Upon hearing she had no restrictions, Eric picked up a piece of meat and said politely, Lady Cladner, would you care to try this? Eric didn't look away, he kept his gaze on the princess, quietly watching her reaction. But then, Misha chewed twice, and spat the food straight onto his face. Before anyone could react, she flung her soup bowl across the table. Still, Eric remained calm. Was the food not to your liking? He asked gently. Then turned to the maids. Take her highness to change into something clean. As Misha was led away, silence fell over the dining room. A silence perfect for quiet conspiracies. The earl shot a glance at his wife, fingers tapping out a code only she could read. Is it really necessary to keep her alive this long? The countess smirked at his stupidity. If we kill that woman, we won't last another day. Of course, Eric understood what his mother truly meant. The kingdom of Esqualier was once held up by 3 noble houses, revered as the 3 pillars of the realm. The House of Sarek, guardians of internal stability. The House of Chris, enforcers of law and order. And the House of Cladner, defenders of the realm's borders. Each house held immense power over the empire's military and governance. The former king had 3 queens. The first queen hailed from the House of Sarek. Her son, none other than the infamous tyrant, Belmeric II. A king in name but a destroyer in action. Under the guise of restoring royal power, he wiped out the Sarek family, his own mother's kin. But he wasn't satisfied. Next came the oppression of House Chris and House Cladner. Driven to desperation, the 2 houses made a secret pact. They arranged a marriage between heirs and planned a rebellion to follow the war's end. But fate had other plans. The House of Cladner achieved a victory too grand to be denied, a feat that won over the people's hearts. After years of tyranny, the weary citizens began to shift their loyalty, and the king could feel it slipping through his fingers. The earl, shaking with fury, growled, "That deranged, broken little girl. What use is she to us now?" The countess gestured for the attendants to leave. "I heard the girl used to be quite normal, until she witnessed someone die inside the palace. Don't you think it's tragic? You still have the luxury to pity her?" The earl snapped, turning to his son. "This very morning, some of our retainers suggested replacing you with Amberic, saying it might be easier to gain the Chris Marquis's favor that way. Do you understand what that means? That lunatic has put your entire position at risk. What about Grand Duke Hegel? Is he still stalling?" The earl sneered. "That coward, he's too weak to act. Maybe when he was cut down they removed more than just his manhood." Hegel, the king's cousin. Aside from the princess, the last living royal with legitimate blood. Without him, any rebellion would lack royal legitimacy. But after a mysterious accident that left him crippled and childless, he all but vanished from court. The earl's fury boiled over. "Nothing goes the way I want. Not a single damn thing. Damn it all." He stormed out of the dining hall in rage. The countess smirked. So much for controlling his temper. And to think, just one marriage could bind 2 great houses together. "Tell me, Eric, what's your opinion?" Eric spoke calmly. Forging an alliance through marriage between 2 noble houses was a poor strategy from the start. All it does is draw the king's suspicion faster, and the next royal heir still hasn't been named. It'll take years to sway the other noble families to our side. The countess nodded. "You're right. Perhaps I've spent too long on the battlefield. Politics seems to dull my senses. Even a young man like you sees it clearly, and yet he still speaks of harming that child." "Let's wait and watch for now," Eric replied. The countess glanced at him. "It's good that the maids have nothing to report. But Eric, don't get attached to her. No feeling is more fleeting than a man's affection. If you offer her warmth now only to take it back later, it would have been kinder never to offer it at all." On the way back, Eric couldn't stop thinking. Even his mother thought it was better to keep his distance. But every time Eric thought about the cruelty Misha had endured, he found it impossible to stay indifferent. Suddenly he heard shouting from up ahead. "Get on the bed. Stop dawdling. What's gotten into you today? Ate too much and finally learned to fight back?" Then came Eric's voice, calm, gentle but laced with quiet authority. "Thank you for your efforts. From here on, I'll be taking care of my wife personally. You may leave now. The two maids hesitated but could not refuse. We'll return in the morning then. Once they left, Misha visibly relaxed. She still didn't say much, but Eric continued to speak to her patiently. You seem to be in a good mood today. This is our estate in the capital. We'll be traveling between here and our territory in Claudi's that I hope you'll come to like it. And if there's anything you dislike, just let me know. The princess was still playing with her hair, completely absorbed. Eric felt a twinge of disappointment. She had looked him in the eye when he entered. Had she already lost interest in him? Then his gaze drifted. Her legs were bare beneath the flimsy gown. Was this all she had to wear? It looked more like a prison shift than proper clothing. Suddenly Misha looked up. And because they were so close, Eric froze in place. She puckered her lips and let out a few playful pft sounds. And in the very next instant, she spat a mouthful of saliva straight into his face. Eric blinked, stunned. As he wiped his face, he sighed, Your Highness, it's not polite to spit at people. He gently patted her on the back. You should get some rest. I'll finish up a few things, then I'll join you. If you need anything, just call me. Thunder rumbled across the pitch-black night sky. Moonlight spilled through the window, casting silver shadows on the two figures in bed. Eric was fast asleep, deep and unaware. He didn't notice that right beside him his wife was staring at him, with a disturbingly blank expression. Gone was the dazed, clumsy girl from the day. Misha now looked eerily lucid. The next morning everything seemed normal. Eric gently scooped a spoonful of soup, holding it toward her lips. But he paused. She looked paler than usual. And yet, she had been just fine the night before. He coaxed her softly, trying to get her to eat a little more. But before he could finish his sentence, Misha suddenly shoved her hand into the soup bowl. He grabbed a handful and stuffed it into her mouth, licking her fingers like a wild animal. Once again, Eric was left speechless by her. Ever since his marriage to the princess, the atmosphere in the estate had shifted. As the captain of the knights, Eric still trained at the grounds daily. But no matter where he went, he was met with guarded eyes. People pausing, hesitating, like something heavy hung in the air, pressing on everyone's shoulders. Why are you all standing around? He asked sharply. Is today's training already over? At some point, the earl had stopped joining them for meals altogether. The countess, watching her husband's brooding silence, quietly complained that he never learned to manage his emotions. Even the once loyal retainers of House Cladner had begun to drift, disorganized, uneasy. And yet not one dared to speak against Eric. Because Eric remained calm, collected, as if nothing at all had changed. After training, Eric learned that the princess had wandered into the maid's workroom. The room was filled with sunlight and the soft scent of freshly dried linens, warm and peaceful. A group of maids sat in a circle, whispering quietly to one another, while Misha lay at the center of it all, relaxed and still. Her hair, it sparkles, one girl said. Even prettier than silver thread. That I once saw a little white kitten like that. Its fur was pure snow. She's just as adorable. Eric entered just in time to hear the tail end of their conversation. And of course, the two maids who were supposed to be watching over Misha were nowhere to be seen. He stepped forward and gently picked the girl up. I'll take care of her from here, he said, firm but kind. Carrying Misha in his arms, Eric walked down the corridor, climbed the stairs and returned to their shared bedroom. The moment he stepped inside, she jolted awake, eyes wide and alert. Then came the struggling. Careful, Eric said softly. Let me set you down first, that you'll hurt yourself like this. But as soon as he released her, she darted to the far side of the bed, eyeing him with clear distrust. Over the past few days, Eric had started to notice something. If I had to put it into words, she doesn't dislike me. She just treats me like a walking transport device. And yet, because of how different she was, he couldn't help but pay close attention to every little detail. Just then he noticed something tangled in her hair. Without thinking, he reached out to remove it. But Misha recoiled instantly, flinching like he'd tried to strike her. Eric paused, wondering, had he really frightened her just now? I didn't mean to scare you, he said softly. I only wanted to get that thing out of your hair. But Misha buried her face in the blanket like an ostrich, refusing to come out. So Eric sat there quietly watching her. And when she finally peeked out again, There wasn't a trace of fear in her expression. He suddenly recalled something the maids had said. I once saw a kitten like that. Snow white fur, glowing in the light. Now that he looked again, she really did resemble that kitten. A chuckle escaped his lips. Soon Misha had curled up and fallen asleep. Eric rose and moved to his desk, quietly getting back to work. The royal maids from the palace had all but handed Misha off to the estate's regular staff. And whenever possible they'd vanish without a trace. Something about it didn't sit right. Meanwhile, food shortages were starting to affect the commoners in their territory. There were simply too many issues demanding his attention. And now, yet another had been added to the list. The spy he'd sent to trail the Earl had returned with a new report. The old man had been secretly meeting with a woman at a tavern. Truth be told, Eric's suspicions had begun even earlier, back when his father suddenly pushed for a marriage alliance with the House of Chris. On the surface, it had seemed like a reasonable match. But something about it had always felt off. And no matter how he tried, that gut feeling refused to go away. From that day forward, Eric began quietly monitoring the people around his father. It didn't take long to notice. A tavern girl was visiting his father's residence far too often. At first, the realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. But on a battlefield where every decision was life or death, emotions like that had no place. So he began investigating. Was she planted? Was someone using her to manipulate the Earl? He told no one. And yet, when the war ended, his father didn't just bring the woman back. He even had his right-hand man Karlnik take her as a concubine. Frustrated, Eric compiled everything into a letter, evidence included, and sent it to his mother. Her reply? Utter indifference. If some desperate woman wants that old fool, let her have him. At least now I don't have to see his face every night. She didn't care, and his investigation wasn't going anywhere either. The woman showed no contact with any higher forces. He set the letter aside with a sigh. No new leads, for now. In truth, his mother's reaction hadn't surprised him. Their marriage had always been a partnership, a shared responsibility in managing the family. Just then, a soft rustle came from the bed. Misha was awake. She rubbed her eyes, still drowsy, and slowly limped her way toward him. You're up already? He asked gently. Is there something you need? As always, she gave no reply. But this time she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. Then without warning she climbed right into his lap. Her fingers grasped one of the letters on his desk. Seeing the sparkle in her eyes, Eric chuckled. Curious about this. It's really not that interesting. You usually avoid me. So this time, when you came to me, I didn't mind it, not at all. Even when she began tearing the letter into pieces, one page at a time, Eric didn't stop her. With everything else, his duties, his bitterness toward the king, love had never been something he had time to think about. But now, just the thought that she would be the Oneto, spend the rest of her life beside him, brought with it a strange, unfamiliar warmth. As a boy, when he first learned what it meant to be a knight, he felt pride and purpose. But the older he grew, the more reality sobered him. No matter how noble the title sounded, he was in the end just a vessel, a tool to carry on the bloodline. So he never placed expectations on his future wife. Even one who found joy in tearing paper to pieces was fine. To be honest, ever since he fully understood what it meant to be the heir, he stopped believing in the romantic ideals of marriage. Now, with all the letters shredded, Misha's eyes were fixed on another target, a sealed envelope stamped with a noble crest. This time Eric raised his hand to stop her. Misha, no. He gently took the letter from her hands. This one mustn't be torn. Misha reached out again, trying to snatch the letter. Eric dodged playfully. Even if you chase me, it's no use. I haven't finished reading it yet. The room echoed with her drawn-out sounds mixed with his amused scolding. No, not that one either. At least let me finish it first. Meanwhile, in the countess's study, a maid was quietly asking, Madam, with the March recitation event approaching, shall we prepare a large heater for the greenhouse? The countess replied coolly, a small one will suffice. It's quieter than usual this year. Just then the door swung open. Misha marched right in. Without a word, she flopped onto the floor, purring like a cat. The countess raised a brow, clearly surprised. Well, this is unusual. I'd heard the princess usually stays with the maids. What brings her here today? A maid leaned in and whispered, "Madam, shouldn't we stop calling her the princess? She's family now after all." "Good point," the countess nodded. "But I haven't quite decided what to call her yet." "Lady Arlen," she said thoughtfully, "I've spent most of my years on the borderlands but I'm not well versed in palace etiquette. What's the proper way to address her in this case?" Dial averted her gaze. "I don't really know either." The countess sighed inwardly. Figures. She doesn't even want to blend in, let alone help with anything. A more composed maid stepped forward. "Madam, I asked around that I end similar situations. The Edbarls addressed Her Highness by name. Perhaps we should do the same. That I believe her name is Misha." The countess turned to the girl and in a tone far gentler than usual softly said, "Misha." The girl's bright blue eyes slowly turned toward her. Then, suddenly she shot up from the floor. And on her face bloomed a smile, not one befitting a proper lady, but dazzling enough to outshine everything in the room. "Oh my," the countess chuckled. "It seems Her Highness has given me permission to call her Misha. What a lovely name." Suddenly Dial spoke up. "It seems the princess really likes you, madam. May she stay here until dinner time?" The countess nodded with a smile. "Of course. Go get some rest." Once Dial had left, the maid at the countess's side let out a breath of relief. That could have gone badly. Even a single misstep in a dress could have been used against us. "From what I've heard," she continued, "Lady Dial does little other than personally bathe the princess, and Lady Malika disappears all day long." The countess smirked, but her thoughts turned sharper. They're being bold, too bold. Which means there's something more behind it. Best to play along for now. That we still don't know what charges they might be preparing to throw at us. She made no effort to hide these words from Misha. Then she pressed her fingers to her forehead. "Addie, would you fetch my headache medicine? It should be in my room." When Addie returned, she was met with an unexpected sight. Misha nestled quietly at the countess's feet. As she stepped closer, she realized the princess had fallen asleep, her head resting on the countess's lap. And the countess, she didn't move. She simply let her stay there. Addie stepped closer, carefully holding the medicine. "Are you all right, madam? If the headache's too much, we should call a physician." But the countess quietly shifted the conversation. "She's 20 now, isn't she? That's what the palace records say, and I believe it's accurate. They say she watched half the royal family slaughtered, right before her eyes. At such a young age. It's no wonder she turned out like this. She's such a beautiful child, and yet her life has been nothing but suffering. Those features, even the color of her eyes, striking really. But she's far too thin. We'll have the kitchen make something richer for her." Addie had always assumed her mistress cared little for her new daughter-in-law, and yet, the countess had noticed everything, every detail, and suddenly, a familiar ache rose in Addie's chest. Could it be, the madam sees someone else in her, in the princess? Just then the countess looked down. Misha had woken. With a smile tugging at her lips, the countess said, "Oh, Misha, we'll need to trim those nails soon, and get your hair brushed properly." When Eric returned from training, he was told the princess was with his mother. Before he even reached the door to the countess's room, he heard voices inside. "Madam, would you like me to trim the princess's toenails instead?" "No need. I'll do it myself," his mother replied gently. A sudden change might startle her. "What are you doing?" Eric stood frozen at the doorway, eyes widening in disbelief. The moment he stepped into the room, something had felt wrong. His mother, calm, calculating, was the kind of woman who showed sympathy at most, never intimacy. She was rational to the point of coldness, even with her own son. But the way she looked at the princess now, it was unmistakable affection. That expression was one she hadn't worn since his sister Rogier was still alive. If she's starting to see her daughter in Misha, then can I really just let this continue? He stepped forward quickly. "Give me the scissors. I'll do it." That thought had only come to him because he could still remember it vividly. The way his mother looked on the day his sister died. He didn't know if he should stop this before it went further, or let it be. His expression was heavy, but his hands moved with practiced ease, trimming the princess's nails with care. Misha looked up slightly, her bright blue eyes fixed on him with quiet curiosity. "It tickles," she murmured. And then, Addie felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at the princess, and froze. Somewhere in the midst of it all, Misha's entire expression had changed. Oh no, she's not happy anymore. Addie's eyes darted to the tray of sweets nearby. Without thinking, she grabbed a pastry and shoved it into Misha's mouth. For a moment, the room went completely silent. Everyone stared. Eric blinked, then asked with genuine confusion, "Why did you do that?" Addie patted her chest, relieved. She looked a little upset just now, but every time I've given her sweets, she calms down right away. I think she really loves desserts. Laughter bubbled from the countess. She's adorable when she eats like that. Watching her enjoy it so much, it honestly lifts my mood too. Just a day ago, Eric had tended to her like always. But something still didn't sit right with him. What exactly about her reminds mother of my sister? Apart from the slight similarity in their eye color, there wasn't much resemblance at all. If it's about eye color, then wasn't Amberic an even closer match? Yet mother had never shown him special attention. Just then a servant arrived with a dish of roasted quail. The moment the plate touched the table, Misha suddenly clutched her head. Eyes shut tight, her face contorted in pain. Her hands began to flail wildly as if trying to swat away something no one else could see. Could it have been the quail? He quickly had the dish removed from the room. Not long after, Misha calmed down. Did something happen to her after eating quail in the past? The next day, Eric couldn't focus during training. His mind kept drifting, wondering if she'd eaten properly. When he left that morning, she still looked pale and listless. As noon approached, he called the session early and hurried back to the estate. No sooner had he arrived than a servant rushed over. "Your Highness, the princess fell into the stream. She's bathed, eaten, and rested since and is currently in the maid's workroom." "She fell into a stream?" Eric repeated, shocked. The servant nodded. "Yes, on the way to the chapel with the countess. I believe she slipped in while watching the fish." Upon hearing that his mother had taken her out, Eric finally relaxed. With the countess around, there wouldn't have been any real danger. Still, he thought, she's had quite a busy day. Apparently, the young lady isn't too fond of chapels. At first, when mother said they'd go together, she followed along without complaint. But once they reached the entrance, she started throwing a fit and refused to step inside. In the end, they had no choice but to let her wait outside with a few maids until the service ended. Thinking about it, she probably wasn't in the best mood today. Maybe like yesterday, something sweet might cheer her up? So he ordered the steward to prepare desserts daily, to be kept on the table just in case. That evening, Misha sat quietly, mouth open, waiting for him to feed her. "Why so obedient tonight?" he asked with a chuckle. "You seem lively enough again. I guess you're feeling better. Don't just eat meat though. Try some vegetables too." Carefully, he stacked the onion and beef together, holding the perfect bite out to her. But just as he reached her mouth, the onion slipped and fell. "It's all right," he said gently. "I'll get you a fresh one." He reached out, then froze halfway. The onion had landed right on her chest. That complicated things that he suddenly felt his nerves spike. "Pardon me, this might be a bit improper." He leaned in, trying to retrieve it without touching her, delicately, respectfully. But as the food passed in front of her again, Misha lunged for it, trying to bite midair. Eric quickly pulled back, only to have her grab his arm. "I'll get you a new one. This one's not clean." Misha wasn't having it, her tiny face scrunched up, pouty and full of protest. He didn't dare struggle too hard, afraid to hurt her, and in that moment she got her chance. Chomp. Right onto his finger. The sharp pressure of her teeth, paired with the softness of her lips, sent a jolt through Eric that he yanked his hand back immediately, almost instinctively. Misha blinked, staring at him in shock. But then, the little cat who'd lost her prey snapped. She grabbed the tablecloth, and with one swift motion, flipped the entire spread. The door creaked open and Dial stepped in just in time to see them covered in soup and chaos. She stared, expression full of undisguised contempt. "Really? Again? Every meal ends like this. Doesn't he get tired of it?" But Eric didn't answer. He remained seated, completely still. His fingers still tingled with the memory of her bite. Damn it. His thoughts were starting to spiral. That image, her lips wrapped around his finger, kept flashing in his head. And worse, he could still feel it, that warm, wet pressure at his fingertips. Yes, she was technically his wife, But in truth she acted no differently from a child. She likely didn't even grasp what being a husband meant. He mustn't see her as a woman. Eric repeated that to himself over and over. There can be no thoughts. None whatsoever, and yet the flush on his ears, and the way he avoided her gaze, betrayed him completely. Not long after, the countess informed him. A poetry recital would be held at the estate on Wednesday. She asked that he keep an eye on the princess during the event. Though the recital sounded like a harmless gathering, it was, in fact, a subtle arena where the mistresses of noble houses shared whispers about the corrupt royal court and the balance of power. This time House Cladner was hosting. Preparations had been underway for days in the estate's greenhouse. Most notably, the Marchioness of Cris, along with her only daughter, would be attending. And while the broken engagement wasn't technically their fault, tensions were still inevitable. After explaining this, the countess took Misha by the hand and headed toward the greenhouse. Eric averted his eyes awkwardly, refusing to look directly at her, and yet the words left his lips before he could stop them. Misha, did you have fun today? The countess let out a laugh. You sound just like a father dropping his child off with the nanny. Why don't you just come along too? I have work to do, Eric replied quickly, just passing by to check on her. But one glance at the girl, and the excuse caught in his throat. I suppose I'll go take a quick look. The greenhouse was spacious, filled with sunlight and the scent of greenery. Misha wandered about like a curious little animal, darting from one corner to the next, wide-eyed. Watching her like that, the tension Eric had carried all morning finally eased. Just then, two of the maids who often played with Misha approached. Oh, Lady Misha, you're here too? Why didn't you come find us earlier? We've been waiting for you all day. In the very next instant, as her eyes landed on the caged bird, Misha froze in place, like she'd been nailed there. A storm cracked across the sky, thunder and lightning ripping through the darkness. In the grand hall, crows flapped and shrieked, their wings cutting through the air in a deafening frenzy. Blood splattered across the walls, and beneath her feet lay the nightmare she had tried so desperately to forget. A parrot spoke. Its voice was distorted, almost inhuman. Misha, I think Mommy did something wrong. But even when a mother does something wrong, she must be punished. Right? That's why Mommy is now. The rest was drowned in a piercing scream. Misha collapsed, clutching her head, her body racked with tremors. She curled on the ground, gasping, overcome with pain and panic. Around her, the servants exchanged looks, some filled with worry, some with fear, others with stunned fascination, and some with open disgust. Every eye from every direction converged on the broken girl, trapped once more at the center of it all. While everyone else stood frozen, Eric was the first to rush toward her. Are you all right? He asked, kneeling beside her. Here, lean on me. The onlookers remained silent, no one truly understanding what had just happened. Misha suddenly threw herself into his arms, as if clinging to the only lifeline left in her world. Her body trembled violently, racked by invisible terror. What the hell is going on? Eric demanded. Malika replied flatly. The young lady reacted to the bird that she's afraid of birds. But this is clearly more than just fear, she added. Her condition, it's always been a bit unusual. The countess's voice cut sharp. And you didn't think to inform us of this beforehand? If you can't even manage that, what use are you in this estate at all? One of the maids scoffed, her tone laced with arrogance. Aren't we the ones bathing and dressing her every day? We simply forgot one small detail. Is that really worth all this aggression? What are you talking about? Addie's voice rang out, shocked and furious. The countess said nothing further, but in her silence, a dangerous chill took root. Eric noticed it, that subtle, simmering displeasure in his mother's eyes. But Misha's condition left him no time to linger. Without hesitation, he gathered her up and led her out of the greenhouse. She refused the quail too. Was that for the same reason? From now on, he decided, no bird meat will be served at the table, and every bird in the greenhouse will be removed. Misha raised her hand and waved softly. Do you want to go to the courtyard? He asked gently. There might be birds there too. She nodded. She still wanted to go. Eric gave a quiet nod in return. Come to think of it, aside from that chapel visit with Mother, she's been confined inside the estate this whole time. Maybe some fresh air, will do her good. Eric gently wiped away the last trace of tears from the corner of her eyes. It's okay now. Rest easy. If any birds come near, I'll chase them away. Once you're asleep, I'll carry you back to your room. With that, he turned his gaze outward, watching the courtyard with quiet vigilance. Perhaps it was the calm after the chaos. But Misha's eyelids fluttered shut and she slowly drifted into sleep. A while later, a figure approached from the distance. His tone was casual. Too casual. Out for a stroll with your lady, huh? You two seem awfully close these days. He leaned in slightly. Oh, she's sleeping, is she? Eric's face darkened. Leave, now. The man stepped even closer, smirking. Tisk. Always so tensed at what's wrong. Worried I'll wake your little wife? Word's getting around, you know. People are talking. Even my family's heard about the two of you. Eric finally looked him in the eye. So, who leaked it this time? He already had a suspicion. His uncle had long been trying to gather support among the side branches of the family, pushing for Amberic to inherit the household. And in times like these, gossip about the heir's personal affairs wasn't exactly helpful. You've got a red-headed maid in your estate, right? Name's Bina, I think. And a scrawny brunette servant boy. Those two have been spreading stories everywhere. The man speaking to him was Amberic himself. Carefree by nature, he'd never had the slightest interest in becoming head of the household. The two had fought side by side on the battlefield and their bond had been forged in blood. Since then, Amberic had always backed Eric without question. Thanks. I owe you one. Again. Don't be ridiculous, Amberic grinned. Honestly, you two have made life around here way more interesting. But seriously, what's going on with you? He smirked. Word is you're completely smitten with the princess. I even heard you trimmed her toenails yourself. What was I supposed to do? Eric shot back. Let my mother do it? Fair point. Amberic burst into laughter. Still, seeing you today, man, you're really laying it on thick. What are you trying to say? Eric's tone had lost all patience. The maids say your wife never walks on her own, Amberic replied. Apparently you carry her everywhere. You saw her that day, didn't you? Eric snapped. Her legs are weak, she can barely control herself. What would you have me do? Drag her around like I did at the wedding? If it were your family, could you treat them that way? Amberic made a face. There it is again. That one-of-a-kind compassion of yours. Look, I get it. Maybe you had no other option, but I still don't get it. When I first heard the rumors, I thought it was all part of a brilliant act. I even admired you a little. Figured you were playing the king. But now, there's no one watching you and yet, you're still going this far? Are you seriously planning to keep that woman as your wife? Eric's gaze turned sharp, deadly. What once had been a matter of protecting Misha's rest, now came from fury. Enough. Shut your mouth. Hey, don't get mad. Amberic raised his hands slightly. I just don't understand you. Wouldn't it be better to get rid of her? Weren't you supposed to marry Ricane? How the hell did things end up like this? Enough, Eric said quietly, cutting him off. It doesn't matter who I marry, as long as it benefits the family, that's all that counts. And as long as I stay with her, the king won't see us as a threat. Besides, she doesn't even know. She doesn't know whose lap she's resting on. Doesn't know what's been done to her. She's already suffered enough. Do I really need to make it worse? Amberic fell silent. After a long pause, he sighed. You're right. Most people treat her like a curse. Like she's something to fear. Eric looked away. It was the first time he'd heard someone say it aloud. His voice dipped almost to a whisper. They think she's a plague. A few days later, the long-awaited poetry recital took place. Nobles with ties to House Cladner arrived one after another. Among them were the Marchioness of Chris and her daughter, both punctual and poised. Eric greeted them politely, his wife by his side, but offered nothing more than the bare minimum. As they entered, dozens of eyes turned toward them, curious, calculating, and the smiles, all as hollow as ever. Despite the awkward tension between the two once-betrothed families, no one acknowledged it aloud. They simply watched, quiet, observant. Moments later, Eric used the excuse of his wife's fragile health, scooped Misha into his arms and walked away without hesitation. Among the crowd, Ricane's gaze narrowed, her eyes fixed thoughtfully on their retreating figures. Wait. Her voice rang out as she stepped forward. "I'd like a word with you. What do you want?" Eric's voice was flat, cold. "Chasing after me like this. Don't you think that's a little presumptuous?" But Rakane ignored him, continuing calmly, "I'll keep it short. We don't have time. Don't have a child with her." Since the king's decree, their engagement, once a political arrangement, had been silently nullified. Which is why Eric couldn't understand what she was playing at now. Without another word, she let the handkerchief slip from her fingers. "Then, until next time," she said softly, turning away. Inside the Chris family's carriage, a voice asked, "Did you drop the handkerchief and tell him everything?" Rakane nodded, saying nothing more. "You saw them too, didn't you?" Rakane's mother scoffed inside the carriage. "Clinging to each other like that, how disgusting. Though I'll admit, that girl is exactly the type men fawn over. Pretty face, always smiling. Truth is, you should have been the one to join their family." Rakane had spent her life learning the virtues expected of a noble housewife. To the family, her existence had never been about her, only about producing heirs. But perhaps, deep down, Rakane didn't quite agree. Her hands bore calluses and scars, the kind no noble girl was ever supposed to have. Meanwhile, Eric had been working late into the night, every night. His mind ran endlessly, weighed down by crisis after crisis. His father had long since lost himself to wine and women, leaving Eric to shoulder nearly all the affairs of their domain. What plagued him most now was the post-war devastation. With so many lives and fields lost, the summer grain supply was dangerously low. "If I can just hold out until fall," he thought. "Once the returning soldiers start harvesting, everything might finally begin to recover." In theory, their hard-won victory should have earned them generous rewards from the royal court. But in reality, House Kladner received little more than scraps. And the barely useful consolation prize of the Harlech iron mine, granted only so the king wouldn't lose face. Eric's gaze drifted toward the other side of the room, where the princess sat quietly. The mine would take years to develop, far too late to solve their current crisis. What mattered now was using whatever they did have to trade for grain. And with the king turning a blind eye, they were on their own. But this wasn't just a matter of coin or crops. With his father lost in drink and distraction, every retainer in the estate now looked to Eric. Those expectant stares, they hurt far more than he ever imagined. It felt like a coffin, pressing heavier and heavier on his chest. Then suddenly he blinked. Misha was tugging gently at his sleeve. "Sorry," he murmured. "I was lost in thought. Do you want to sit with me?" The next second, Misha suddenly wrapped her arms around him. In that moment, Eric remembered the look Emberic had given him, a face full of confusion, unable to understand. He gently patted her back. Of course. Who could understand? Even he wasn't sure he did. She only had to glance at him. And Eric already knew what she wanted. He offered her a piece of candy. "Thinking of going back? Don't. Stay with me a little longer." Just holding her like this, quiet, unmoving, at ease in his arms. Somehow the weight pressing on his chest began to lift. The next day, a maid from House Chris came knocking. Her reason? "My lady seems to have left her handkerchief here." In noble society, a handkerchief isn't just cloth. It's a message. A symbol of affection. For an unmarried lady to accidentally leave one at her former fiancé's estate was a scandal waiting to explode. The countess immediately ordered the staff to find it, at once. To avoid suspicion, the countess issued a quiet order that the handkerchief belonged to the marchioness herself. Unexpectedly, the lead maid from House Chris turned out to be an acquaintance of Malika. During their meeting, the maid spoke bluntly. "The princess must be eliminated within 2 years." Malika responded with chilling ease. "If you want, I can make it happen tomorrow." But the maid shook her head. "No, this isn't something to rush. We'll need to stay in contact moving forward. And we can't keep fabricating excuses to visit the Viscount's estate." "Then let's meet in the city," Malika offered. "I'm free to go out nearly every day. Let's agree on the next meeting place and time now. I'll make myself available." Meanwhile, back at the estate, the countess was personally brushing Misha's hair. Today was a family dining day, and at first she meant to tell the girl to behave herself. But as the words formed, she paused and changed her tone. "Forget it, Misha. As long as you eat well, that's all that matters." Not far away, the count cast a cold, unkind look at Misha. The meal was painfully awkward. Misha accidentally scraped her fork against the plate, making an unbearable screech. It was so grating that it made everyone instinctively wince. The count snapped on the spot. "What is wrong with her?" The countess frowned and tried to calm him. "She's still learning that there's no need to snap at her." Then Eric casually picked up a roasted lamb shank. "This one, just eat it with your hands." The count scoffed. "Unbelievable. How old is she? You still have to teach her how to eat?" The countess shot back coldly. "Don't bother. Misha doesn't need your concern anyway." The count was about to argue, but the countess turned away and told Eric instead, "Give Misha some vegetables." That only made the count more annoyed. His expression darkened even further. He slammed his hand on the table, making the cutlery rattle. "You two are about to meet the king. Don't let that girl mess anything up before then." After those harsh words, the count rose from the table and stormed off. But neither his wife nor his son seemed to care. After all, their visit to the royal palace was only a few days away. The countess turned to Eric and gently asked, "Have you prepared the gift for the royal family?" Eric nodded. "It's been ready for a while now. In the kingdom of Esqueller, there's a tradition. On the 50th day after the wedding, the couple must pay a formal visit to the bride's family. And for Eric and Misha, that meant one place, the royal palace. The morning of their departure finally arrived. The palace maids were suddenly all acting diligently, playing the part of perfect servants. Their sudden professionalism made Eric feel oddly out of place. He looked at the young woman dressed in elaborate royal attire, the same woman he had married while burying all expectations, surrounded by whispers of pity. And yet, she seemed a lot more capable than he had imagined. Eric leaned in and whispered, "Do you even know my name?" Misha gave him a sidelong glance, then turned away in silence. Even without a response, Eric chuckled softly. "It's fine, just a random question." In his mind, Misha probably didn't even remember his name. But even so, having someone to protect didn't seem like such a bad life after all. Before long, they arrived at the royal palace. Harsh sunlight streamed through the tall windows, nearly blinding. The floor was covered in pale marble, pristine and solemn. Everything here was designed with one clear purpose: intimidation. And the more Eric thought about the king and his theatrics, the more he loathed it all. 20 years ago, the young king ascended the throne and secured his power without breaking a sweat. All thanks to his powerful maternal lineage, the House of Sarakides. But 12 years ago, after a war that claimed countless lives, something changed. No one knows exactly what happened in the capital, but the king was never the same. Since then, the central palace became a blood-soaked nightmare. Before one stain could be wiped clean, another head would roll. And now, whose corpse had once lain beneath the floor they were about to step on? Soon the two of them were led into the grand throne room. Eric bowed alongside the princess. "Greetings, your majesty." The man on the throne smirked with a mocking tone. Well, it's been a while." "Hasn't been long, but Misha's complexion looks so much better already." Just then the princess suddenly lost all strength. She stumbled forward and collapsed to the ground. The king continued to stare at Misha, a twisted smile tugging at his lips. "With how radiant she looks, I assume you two will be expecting a child soon?" Ever since the wedding night, Eric had been keeping up the act. He didn't want an innocent girl to suffer the pain of childbirth without even knowing why. Though his heart resisted, the words he spoke told another story. "I hope so too, that it's just, my wife hasn't fully recovered yet." The king waved his hand impatiently. "Spare me the talk of her health. I'm not interested. What I am interested in is something rather curious I heard from the maids. Apparently, the bed sheets from your first night together were soaked in blood. Yet when the princess was bathed, her body was completely clean. From that night till now. Whether it's the bed or her body, spotless. Not a trace left behind. What's wrong? Don't you want an heir with royal blood?" That's when Eric realized he had slipped up. "Aren't you good with words? Then explain yourself. I heard you haven't even touched the princess. What's the matter? Planning to go to the temple and ask for a divorce?" "No, I would never. I don't dare even think of such a thing." Eric was stunned. He never imagined even something so intimate would be reported to the king by the maids. The king's smile twisted even darker. "Is that so? So the cardinal family dares to mock the royal bloodline? My dear Misha is so adorable. And yet you won't even lay a hand on her? Tell me, should I consider your behavior an act of treason against the crown? A heavy weight sank in Eric's chest. So this is the corner he was always meant to be pushed into. Now that the king had uttered the word treason, there was no turning back. Eric might be willing to risk his own life. But what would happen to his parents and the loyal vassals of the cardinal family? He had brought only 70-odd knights into the capital. They stood no chance against the full might of the royal guard. With a casual flick of his hand, the king ordered, "Aisha, come here." To Eric's shock, Misha actually began crawling obediently toward the throne. "My poor little sister," the king cooed. "Help me understand something. Has your husband ever undressed you at night?" But the princess remained silent, focused only on fiddling with her husband's boots as if she hadn't heard a word. The king suddenly yanked Misha's hair, violently and without warning. Misha cried out in pain. Eric shouted, "Your Majesty, please, let go of her." But the king barked, "Misha, I asked you a question. Has he touched you or not?" Tears welled up in Misha's eyes. "It hurts," she whimpered. "Right here, it hurts so much," she murmured, clutching her chest. Eric froze. Those things she was saying had never happened. What was going on? The king suddenly stood, clearly agitated. "Enough. I didn't actually want to hear about my sister's bedroom details. What a disgusting mood this puts me in." The king kicked Misha hard, sending her sprawling. "Take her out, now." Eric stepped forward and silently scooped her into his arms. His expression had completely changed. There were no words. Nothing could capture what he was feeling at that moment. Was it humiliation from being dragged into this crude setup by the king? Was it rage? Or was it the sting of betrayal from the girl he had cared for like family all this time? In the carriage, Eric remained silent. Misha slept quietly in his arms. But the tension in Eric's tightly drawn lips spoke volumes. A storm was coming. The moment they returned to the estate, Eric gave his first order. "I'll be caring for the lady tonight, personally. No one is allowed on the second floor. You, head to the knight's quarters. Bring Cullen here that he'll be in charge of guarding the west wing, second floor." The palace maids exchanged confused glances. Even from the ground floor they could faintly hear the princess screaming. She was thrashing in Eric's arms, crying and struggling desperately. But how could a fragile girl possibly resist a seasoned warrior? Cullen arrived shortly after. "No one gets near this door. If anything happens, report to me immediately." Back in the room, Eric tossed Misha onto the inner servant's bed. "The walls here are thick. Scream all you want, no one will hear you." He seized her wrist, yanked her close and said coldly, "Did you hear me? What I mean is, no matter what you say, no one's going to hear you in here. I already know you can talk to people. So go on, speak." Misha was frozen in place. The sheer weight of Eric's presence was suffocating. She forced a crooked, silly smile, hoping to laugh it off. But Eric wasn't buying it anymore. "I've got plenty of patience," he said coldly. "How long are you planning to keep up this act? If I hadn't caught on today, were you just going to hide it forever? What do you take me for?" One word cut him off completely. "Hubby." That tone, that phrasing, it was exactly like what the countess once said to the count. "You really should stop worrying about Misha. She doesn't want your attention anyway." In that instant, Eric genuinely questioned whether he'd just imagined the whole thing. "Back there, in front of the king, what exactly were you doing?" Eric asked quietly. Misha tilted her head slightly and replied calmly, "Because soon, they'll all be sniffing around like starving hounds looking for any weakness. So we have to make them believe we're perfectly fine." Her tone was steady and fluent, almost unnervingly so, as if the words weren't hers, but something she had heard and memorized. That serene voice and soft face didn't match the subtle tremble in her hands. Her fingers were shaking. She was scared. She was holding herself together. Eric wanted to push further but held himself back. "I'm not trying to pressure you," he murmured, finally letting go of her wrist. He just couldn't believe she was fully aware this entire time. Then what had she really been thinking all along? He'd heard that when Misha was 8, she witnessed her mother's death with her own eyes. And afterward she likely saw more siblings, one by one, executed at the hands of the king. The only reason she survived was likely because she endured scorn and humiliation more brutal than what most would reserve for animals. Just imagining what her life must have been like up till now left Eric speechless. They hadn't known each other for long. He didn't have the right to comfort someone who had endured so much. And besides, no words, especially not a simple "you've suffered enough," could ever bring her peace. He wanted to say something to Misha, but in the end he said nothing at all. That night, the princess slept in the study, and Eric stayed close, keeping watch in silence until morning. At dawn, the butler arrived with breakfast. And with him came Malika. Eric had assumed Malika would be executed for reporting false information. To his surprise, she showed up perfectly fine. When she moved to wake the princess, Eric stopped her. Let her sleep a little longer. He could pretty much guess what Malika was thinking, that they had finally done what they didn't on their wedding night. She was likely here to confirm it. And honestly, letting her believe that might be for the best. Eric sat down to eat breakfast alone. It was then he realized, it had been a long time since he'd eaten by himself. And now every bite tasted like sand. The princess quickly bounced back to her usual self. As always, she began her daily routine. First making a mess of the desk. Then chewing holes into the black-haired man's discarded clothes. She even helped the maid by pulling out a few of her white hairs. And just like that, she'd completed half of her daily checklist. While pretending not to hear the maid's grumbling, her thoughts drifted back to the black-haired man. He seemed really upset yesterday. She wasn't quite sure why. What if he tells someone my secret? What if he gets me kicked out of here? No, even if he was angry. So far, he doesn't seem like a bad person. But what if he really does tell someone about me? The thought sent Misha hurrying to the other side of the estate. There you are, Misha. Did you sleep well last night? I've told you, you shouldn't be running around without someone by your side. It's dangerous. Misha threw herself into the countess's lap. Just as she hoped, the countess gently stroked her hair. Poor thing. Looks like she's still half asleep. Thankfully, she seemed just like usual. As she comforted Misha, the countess continued discussing garden renovations with a servant. They were planning to use mazu wood for the new fences. Misha knew that material. In the royal palace, they used rosewood, which cost 5 times as much as mazu wood. Is this place too poor to afford the fancy stuff? Then again, she had only ever lived in the royal palace and Celia Palace. Her world was limited. Just then, the butler chimed in. Ah, yes. The Legenton family's dairy farm has started making butter and cheese. It's a bit pricey, 20 fassers. But the quality's supposed to be excellent, so I brought some back. Misha blinked in shock. That tiny piece of butter cost 20 fassers. The countess picked up a slice and gently fed it to her. Misha remembered a maid once said a whole bag of flour also cost 20 fassers. That meant this palm-sized butter cost the same as an entire sack of flour. That black-haired man, he was always worrying about the people not having enough to eat. If money was tight, wouldn't it make more sense to buy flour instead? Misha, is it yummy? You're eating it so happily, the countess said warmly. Well then, let's buy around 5 days' worth just for Misha. Normally, they bought butter for only 4 fassers. But 5 days. That was 100 fassers, equal to 1 jerry. The black-haired man, and the countess, why did they always look so happy when they saw me eating? Whatever their reasons were, that kind of gentle care couldn't possibly be just for her. After all, the princess had always been treated like a curse. No one had ever shown her real kindness. Soon evening came. Eric arrived to pick her up. But this time the girl who always ran into his arms didn't move. She didn't want to be alone with him. But Eric didn't give her the chance to run. In a single motion, he scooped her up into his arms with ease. Leaning close, he whispered in a voice only she could hear. Misha, you'd better come with me quietly. Because I haven't told anyone what happened yesterday. After realizing the princess was only pretending to be insane, Eric stopped feeding her and insisted she eat on her own. Misha loathed this man from the depths of her soul. He felt like her natural-born enemy, always standing on the opposite side. Eric was dignified, meticulous, and emotionally restrained, while she, on the other hand, hadn't used a fork and knife in over a decade. Even something as simple as cutting a steak became a struggle for her. Her hands trembled so badly it was painful to watch. Yet Eric calmly praised her efforts with a straight face. Well done. She couldn't believe he'd lie so blatantly while looking her dead in the eye. Furious, she threw down the knife, then grabbed the food with her bare hands and shoved it into her mouth like a starving beast. Eirik froze, clearly stunned by her sudden outburst. His eyes fixed on her, silently asking, "What is it this time?" Misha frowned, her delicate features twisting into a look of pure disdain in response to his question. She thought to herself, if the maids find the table spotless later, they'll start suspecting me again. But to her surprise, Eirik suddenly lowered his head, covering his blushing face. "Don't do that," he muttered. "I get what you're trying to say." Misha was confused. Wait, is he angry? But she'd eaten like a savage before. If that bothered him, he would have shown it long ago. Maybe I should tone it down a little. As she drifted into thought, her chin was suddenly lifted by a firm hand. Eirik carefully wiped the smudges off her face. "So what should I do? Wipe you clean and then feed you again like before?" She nodded, a bit surprised by how quick he was to pick up on her thoughts. "Your hands too," he added, gently pulling her hand toward him and wiping it with care. Misha stared at him, unaccustomed to such gentleness. Eventually, she averted her gaze. After dinner, it was time for the usual routine, her bath. But this time, Eirik didn't leave. He stood just outside the bathroom door. Malika brought in a basin of icy water and dumped it over Misha's head without hesitation. Treating her like a fool, she grumbled openly, "Why does this girl never catch a cold? I could really use a few days off." Misha also found it strange. She had truly never gotten sick, not once. Still, it was odd. Usually the chubby maid bathed her. Why was it Malika today? The corners of Misha's lips curled slightly. She turned and grabbed a fistful of Malika's hair. Malika didn't see it coming. Enraged, she shoved back, but she had clearly misjudged the situation. "What are you doing?" Eirik's voice came from behind them. Malika quickly put on a startled expression. "Oh my, I didn't expect you here." As you can see, the princess suddenly started struggling again. "Sometimes she even hurts herself like this. I had no choice. Could you please step out for a moment? It would be easier for me to continue bathing her." Misha sneered inwardly. What a joke. She dares to lie so blatantly just because I can't speak. At that moment, Eirik stepped inside and calmly said, "I'll bathe her myself." "My lord, you can't possibly mean that. The princess might slip into the water, or suddenly lash out. There's no need for you to trouble yourself with this." Malika protested. Eirik shot her a cold glance. "That's exactly why her husband should be the one doing it, don't you think?" Malika quickly tried to talk him out of it by exaggerating the process. Bathing the princess is no easy task. First, you have to shampoo her hair thoroughly, then apply essential oils to the tips, pat every drop of water dry, and finally use moisturizing cream. Misha rolled her eyes inwardly. Liar, they always just scrubbed me down with a cheap bar of soap. Still, it was better than the palace, where they practically threw her into lye water like dirty laundry. With Eirik unwilling to budge, Malika had no choice but to leave, visibly annoyed. Though the maid was finally gone, Eirik now stood frozen, unsure of what to do. He turned his head awkwardly, then muttered, Can you wash yourself?" Misha stared at him in disbelief. Did he really just ask a madwoman to bathe herself? She shook her head firmly. There was no way she could do that on her own. Eirik clenched his jaw, his face flushed red, and finally muttered, "All right, wait a moment." Misha was puzzled. Why does it seem like he's angry again? But she knew pushing his buttons wouldn't help her. So this time, she decided to go along with him. As Eirik sensed her getting closer, he quickly turned away, shielding his face. "What are you doing?" But in the next second, all his embarrassment vanished completely. When Misha dropped the towel, what he saw were scars, raw, jagged marks etched across her body. Each one was a brutal reminder, stabbing into his heart, silently telling him just how much pain this girl had endured. Misha's gaze remained calm, eerily so, as if all of this was just another routine moment in her life. The first time she saw Eirik's tall, imposing frame, she had already decided to obey him. It was how she had always survived. But when she finally saw the expression on his face, memories collided with reality. Fear seized her mind in an instant. She began to shrink back, convinced she must have done something wrong again. Because despite his intimidating appearance, this man had been mostly gentle with her. But now, that look in his eyes, was he about to hit her? She didn't know what she'd done to upset him. But even if she did, would it matter? It's not like she'd ever needed to do something wrong to be beaten before. The pain she expected never came. Misha blinked in surprise, slowly coming back to herself. These scars, they're so deep. How hard did they hit you? Who did this to you? She heard the worry in his voice. Was he feeling sorry for her? Maybe it was the first time anyone had ever spoken to her with such sadness. Misha finally replied, "The king." Irik's expression immediately darkened with sorrow. And just from that one word he looked completely at a loss, unsure how to react. After a moment of composure he gently took her hand. "Let's finish quickly that you'll catch a cold if you stay in too long." Rolling up his sleeves he added, "Tell me if anything feels uncomfortable." "It's my first time bathing someone after all." That's when it hit her. He wasn't angry, his eyes were filled with sympathy. She almost wanted to say, "You can just wash me like a dog." But instead, she quietly lowered herself into the warm water with extra care. For the first time, Misha realized, bathing could actually feel peaceful. A wave of drowsiness crept over her. She felt genuinely content. Misha closed her eyes with a satisfied sigh. She didn't notice the man beside her, quietly wiping her down, cheeks flushed bright red. As someone labeled crazy, she wasn't supposed to feel shy or ticklish. But when Irik started scrubbing her back, she couldn't help but giggle. She instinctively pulled away from his touch. Irik froze when she looked at him. His face turned crimson and he immediately looked away. The usually composed Irik stammered, "Hurry." That awkward shyness, it was almost contagious, and somehow Misha felt herself catching it too. Irik had already been exhausted from the day's work. Once the bath was over, he collapsed onto the bed. Misha looked at him and thought he really must be completely wiped out. Half asleep, Irik reached out a hand toward Misha. "Lie down and rest, you must be tired too," he murmured gently. Misha obediently lay beside him, though she couldn't help thinking, "You're the one who needs rest, not me." His breathing soon evened out, slow and steady. Misha simply watched him sleep in silence. She really couldn't figure him out. Just yesterday she saved his life, and he responded by threatening her. But today when he saw the scars on her body, his eyes had filled with sorrow. And sometimes when she ate like an animal, he couldn't quite hide the disgust on his face. Was he truly asleep now? Even so, he was probably the closest thing to a good person she had ever encountered. Misha quietly slipped out and walked into the room next door. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, Irik's eyes opened and he sat up in bed, staring at the sliver of light seeping through the crack in the door. Then came the faint sound of Misha speaking through the door. Irik furrowed his brows, both annoyed and curious, and walked closer. Her voice became clearer with each step. "Eddie, could you get me some headache medicine? It should be in my room. There's been a food poisoning outbreak in the northern part of the capital. The price of 5-day worth of medicine has jumped to 7 gerii and 2 phaser." Misha's practicing with a fork. Don't scold her. Her tone was fluent, steady, even confident. But if one listened carefully, they'd realize every line was something someone else had said. She was simply repeating the voices from her past. The next morning, a maid came for the usual inspection. The Lord didn't even touch her. Why does everyone have to be dismissed every time? Look at her, not a single mark on her body. For Misha, this kind of thing had happened countless times. But today, her mood was worse than usual. Maybe it was because that dark-haired man had stirred something in her. A sense of shame she hadn't felt in years, and even caught her exhibiting a strange behavior. In the past, while playing the madwoman, she never cared about others' whispers. But now, after her secret was exposed, she found herself wondering if he would mock her. Malika sneered, "What, even after seeing you naked, he didn't feel anything? Figures. Who would ever want someone like you to bear their child?" Misha turned away. Her body had indeed been too clean lately. Not even a single bruise. "I need to take a hard fall sometime soon," she thought. "Only then will their suspicions fade. What should I do?" She didn't want to hurt herself too badly. Maybe I could just break something valuable instead. No, everything in the courtyard was made of simple wood. She couldn't add to their burden. Her eyes shifted to the staircase nearby. The plump maid was still a short distance away. If she timed it right, the fall wouldn't be too serious. It would definitely hurt, but she didn't have a better option. She planned to fake a stumble on the next step and fall down. But just then, a pair of strong hands suddenly reached out. "You really are such a handful." Misha was yanked back into a firm, familiar embrace. Wait, when did he even get here? Misha didn't want to see him at all, especially not after everything that happened last night. Without a word, Eirik led her quietly into the greenhouse. All the birds have been removed. But do you really hate birds that much? Misha hesitated, then softly replied with a quiet "to." Eirik pressed gently. Why? Is there a specific reason? Because the birds ate. Ate what? He asked, genuinely confused. She didn't want to answer. She shot him a glare and turned her head away. Still, he continued, does it hurt when you try to speak? No one else comes here, he added. You're safe. In truth, it wasn't that Misha was worried someone else might come. But her hesitant expression made Eirik sense something deeper. Is it hard for you to speak? He asked gently. In her mind, she could speak clearly, but when the words had to come out, it was much harder than she expected. Maybe it's because you haven't spoken to anyone in so long. It's hard to translate your thoughts into words now, isn't it? Misha honestly didn't know how to explain it. Yet somehow this man had guessed the real reason she struggled to speak. Eirik continued softly, that's why you repeat things others have said, right? Don't just nod. Try saying something. I've seen you respond before. You can manage short answers, can't you? Misha realized she had a hard time refusing Eirik. Every time she saw that overly serious face of his. Even if she didn't want to respond, she somehow felt she should. All right. The moment the word left her lips, she was startled by the sound of her own voice. That familiar wave of embarrassment rushed over her again. It's okay, Eirik reassured her. The more you speak, the easier it'll get. Then he gently took her hand. Here, want to try copying me? He guided her hand to rest on his throat. The vocal cords are around here. Can you feel them? He began producing different sounds, explaining as he spoke. The vocal cords vibrate depending on the pitch and volume. Misha felt the subtle vibrations under her fingertips, but he smiled and asked, feels kind of nice, doesn't it? This was how someone helped me during my voice change. Now it's your turn to give it a try. Misha placed her hand on her own throat, though her mind was now occupied with curiosity. What exactly is a voice change period? As she mimicked the sounds, she began to feel the vibration of her vocal cords under her fingers. Eirik grinned. Feel it. Try saying something, anything you want. What is a voice change period? Eirik paused, then burst out laughing. Sorry, I just wasn't expecting that to be your first question. It's the time when people hit a certain age and their voices start to change. We call it the voice change period. Is there anything else you want to ask? Or anything you need? Deep down, Misha did have a question. One that felt urgent and had been weighing on her for a long time. They said, the Lord didn't even touch her, so why dismiss everyone? What does that mean? Eirik froze. Did he not understand what she was asking? As Misha pondered, she suddenly turned and lifted her legs, mimicking the implied act. That's when Eirik realized he hadn't misheard. He quickly panicked and waved his hands. No, wait, don't do that. I get it, I understand. Please, don't ever do that again, okay? But Misha just blinked and asked calmly, then, when are we supposed to do it? She knew all too well. If they didn't consummate soon, she could be taken back to the king at any time. Flustered, Eirik stammered. I just need a little more time. Let's try getting closer to each other first, yeah. That way we'll both feel less awkward. Misha hadn't quite grasped what he meant, but Eirik had already stood up. Come on, I'll show you around the greenhouse. She remembered the king once used failing to consummate the marriage as a pretext to accuse the Kladner family of treason. She couldn't understand how Eirik remained so calm in the face of that. Especially with maids still secretly watching them on the king's orders. Not long after, Eirik looked at her in surprise. So, you're not actually disabled? The girl gave a sly, cat-like grin. So I've been tricked from the very beginning, huh? Of course. Her awkward, stumbling walk had been carefully practiced to perfection. How did you manage that? He asked. But Misha still wasn't very good at expressing herself. After a moment of thought, she decided to keep it to herself. For now. When she suddenly stretched out her arms, Eirik stopped and asked gently, do you want me to carry you? You've walked a lot more than usual today. She played with a strand of her hair, realizing this man never forced her to do anything, nor did he pry into her thoughts. How fortunate, He was even better than she had imagined. Maybe this kindness of his would last a long time. She remembered how, one day before the wedding, a priestess had explained to her what was supposed to happen on the first night. It was presented merely as a formality, and the priestess had described the steps in a flat, matter-of-fact tone. Yet something about it had felt off, especially when she mentioned the intense pain involved. So Misha had always seen it as something troublesome, even a bit terrifying. But now she understood, it might be one of the few ways left to secure this marriage. But ever since their conversation a few days ago, he'd been coming up with excuse after excuse to delay things. Their fates were both in the king's hands. So why was she the only one feeling anxious? Sensing her gaze, Eirik asked gently, "Is there something you want to say to me?" Misha's voice carried a hint of irritation. "When are we going to become close? What if all his kindness up to now had been nothing but an act? What if he was only stalling to make it easier to divorce her later so he could cast her aside? If that wasn't the reason, then could it be?" She suddenly recalled Malika's words. "Even if you were naked, he probably wouldn't feel a thing." Every time someone here treated her well, her mind would spiral into a storm of anxious thoughts. That's why she so desperately wanted to secure this marriage. Because she truly, genuinely liked the life she had here. Sometimes, in this place, it almost felt like being back in that time, when she still knew what happiness was. Eirik grew visibly anxious as Misha continued to stay silent. "Misha, are you feeling unwell? I've called you several times." Unsure how to voice her anxiety, she simply repeated what the maid had once said. Well, who would want someone like her to carry their child? Eirik looked utterly stunned. What are you saying? Who said something like that to you?" That sharp tone. Must have been Lady Malika, wasn't it? "So that's what you meant earlier." Eirik's face flushed once again. "Like I said before, we barely know each other at all." Misha stared at Eirik, thinking to herself, here we go again, with that same excuse. She tossed aside the pillow and suddenly began repeating his own words. "Let's try getting closer first. That way we'll both feel less awkward." Eirik blinked, realization dawning. "Ah, so that's why you were being so obedient that day. You didn't seriously think doing what I said would earn you that right? That's sneaky. But still, I do need time to mentally prepare. That kind of thing, it's not something to be taken lightly. As for how we'll approach it, maybe we can talk it through tonight?" But Misha clearly remembered hearing stories. Some people do it the first day they meet. That night, Eirik placed the candle holder beside the bed. "Things are a bit complicated right now, especially with those maids who came with you still keeping an eye on us. So, while you want to do what's expected of a first night, I'd rather get to know you better. How about this, each night you tell me something about yourself. Anything at all. In return, I'll cooperate with you too. Let's start with something simple. Madam, what kind of food do you like?" Misha replied, "Meat." Eirik looked surprised. "Really? I thought you'd say cake or cookies." "I like fruits, and vegetables too," he added. Back on the battlefield, all we had were dry, flavorless rations. The moment he mentioned the battlefield, Misha's eyes lit up, eager for him to go on. Seeing her expression, Eirik chuckled. "Don't you get bored staying at home all the time?" She didn't really understand what bored meant. This had always been her way of life. Still, she knew she had to come up with some kind of response. So she looked up and said, "Eirik, don't talk anymore." Eirik blinked in surprise. "Wait, were you mimicking my mother just now?" He laughed again. "But you called me by name, that made me really happy. Say it one more time." It wasn't a difficult request, so Misha softly called his name again. Eirik's expression shifted slightly, as if something deep inside him had been touched. "Very good," he said. "You have a beautiful voice, my lady." He gently cupped her face. "No matter what, you've been obedient again tonight. So let me offer a little something in return." He leaned in and kissed her softly on the forehead. Misha froze in place, staring at him in stunned silence. It was the first time Eirik had ever felt such intense curiosity about someone. Not only had she fooled everyone since childhood, even he, a man who had tended countless wounded, hadn't seen through her fake disability. To survive in a palace that devoured people from the inside out, and keep up the act until now, it was nothing short of remarkable. Eirik had grown increasingly curious about Misha's past. He wondered what went on inside that quiet little head of hers every day. The urge to understand everything about her, to truly know her, was becoming overwhelming. But the very next morning he heard word that his mother had flown into a rage. When he rushed over, what he saw was Misha lying in bed, pale as a sheet. For a moment, Irik's mind went completely blank. His mother, usually calm and composed, was furious to the point of nearly ordering bloodshed. It had happened that morning during the maid's routine inspection of Misha's body. After confirming that nothing had occurred between the couple, Malika suddenly froze. Her eyes locked onto Misha's face, cold and piercing. The princess has been acting strangely lately, but I can't quite put my finger on what's wrong. The plump maid asked casually, "By the way, are you going to see them today?" "No, tomorrow," Malika replied coolly. "Wonder if they'll bring anything decent this time," she added with a sneer. Misha couldn't understand exactly what they were talking about, but her instincts, sharpened over more than a decade in the royal palace, screamed danger. Malika scoffed. The kingdom's so-called 3 pillars, what a joke. "Seriously," the plump maid agreed. "How long are we supposed to stay in this place?" At that moment Misha knew, if she didn't make a scene today they'd start digging for the truth. So she caused a full-blown commotion, running wildly around the second floor, making sure dozens of maids were watching her every move. Then without hesitation Misha leapt off the balcony, landing right in a bed of blooming flowers, which served as the perfect cushion. The lady sat beside the bed, her voice chillingly cold. "If you're here to monitor her, then monitor her properly. You two have nothing better to do all day. How hard is it to keep her from getting hurt?" It wasn't until she saw that it was her son who had entered, that the harshness in her expression finally eased. Irik, however, never once looked at her. His eyes were fixed solely on Misha. He paid no attention to the plump maid's frantic attempts to explain herself. With a grave expression, he sat down and gently reached out, checking Misha's forehead for a fever. In truth, Misha was only pretending to sleep. After sensing the tension in the room, she didn't dare open her eyes, which meant she didn't see the look on Irik's face, an expression caught between fury and heartbreak. "You there? Check her condition," he ordered. The girl who stepped forward was named Ji, one of the doctors from the Kladner Knight Order. "From now on, I'll assign one of the estate's maids to care for the lady," Irik continued. "You two, return to the palace and report everything that's happened." After sending Malika and Idil away and once the others had cleared out, the lady at the bedside suddenly snapped, her tone unhinged. "I never thought working with such incompetence would be this frustrating. Should have just torn them all apart from the start. Don't you think so, Irik?" Irik remained silent. He knew his mother was once again seeing a ghost of her lost daughter in Misha. It had been a spring day just before Rojal's birthday. Without her mother's accompaniment, she'd wandered alone into the forest, only to be struck by a drunken knight and never returned. That day his mother had completely lost her sanity. Not just the knight who struck her daughter, but even the stable hand who gave him the horse. And both of their families were sentenced to death. His father had condemned her actions as far too extreme. From that point on, their relationship had fallen apart completely. And today her mental state seemed dangerously similar to that day. It was best not to let her interfere. No one knew what she might do. "Mother," Irik said firmly, "this is my wife's matter. I'll handle it myself." Just then Jay finished her examination. The young lady only has a sprained right wrist. I've already treated it shouldn't affect her movement too much." At those words, the lady finally eased her tense posture. "Thank goodness. You're right. I'd better go back and calm down for a while." Before leaving, the lady leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on Misha's forehead. "I trust you'll handle this well." Jerry, sensing how dangerously tense the captain had become, tried to quietly edge away. "I'll be leaving too." "Wait," Irik said sharply. "You mentioned she only had a wrist injury. Are you sure about the rest?" Jerry immediately folded. "I'm terribly sorry actually. The young lady has several older deep injuries. Repeated trauma in the same areas. Most are long-healed and untreatable now, so he didn't mention them." "Is that so?" Irik's tone was unreadable. Very panicked. "I swear I won't tell a soul. You know I've never leaked anything about a patient, ever." Irik cut her off. You're not too busy lately, right? Her froze, sensing doom. A lot of people think I'm not busy. Starting tomorrow morning, you'll be working here. Joy stood there, stunned. Eirik hadn't given her any room to refuse. If you understand, then leave. Bang. The door shut tight behind her. Now only Eirik and Misha remained in the room. His voice was still cool. I know you're not asleep. Why did you do it? There has to be a reason. Misha clung to her act, unwilling to face him, but the slight tremble in her body betrayed her. Eirik sighed, then softened his tone, gently coaxing her. It's okay, Misha. Just talk to me. What made you cause such a commotion today? Only then did Misha slowly open her eyes. There's a reason. Then tell me, he said. It's hard to explain. Eirik gave up. She'd completely disarmed him. Misha, you absolutely cannot hurt yourself again. If things get too much, smash something, scream, do anything else. But she still wore that same evasive look. Eirik leaned in closer, voice firm. You can do anything you want. Just don't hurt yourself. Do you understand? Promise me now, you won't let yourself get hurt again. Misha nodded like a child. I promise. Only then did Eirik breathe a sigh of relief. All right, get some proper rest now. If you get hungry, just call for me. But noticing her still lively eyes, he asked, You look wide awake. Got something else on your mind? That person from earlier, is she my maid now? Eirik almost laughed in disbelief. You're this injured and that's what you're curious about. Yes, she's your maid for now. Don't like her? Misha shook her head. Good that she's a student of a renowned physician, supposedly very skilled in treating wounds. Looks delicate but can take down a full-grown wolf, and she's tight-lipped too. How tight-lipped? She can't be bribed. By anyone. But since she's a doctor, they didn't drag her in for questioning. Still, just to be safe, you'd better keep pretending to be crazy for now. Remember the knight guarding the palace gate when we arrived? His name's Curran. From now on, I'll have him stationed on the second floor, to protect you. Just so you know, Curran once endured torture and lost 2 fingers. That's why he fights with his left hand. Out of everyone I know, he's the one I trust the most. I haven't told him about your situation yet, so don't worry too much. And since you're injured, I'll take a break from the night order and stay with you for a while. The moment he said that, Misha's entire expression lit up. She didn't hide it at all. Her joy was clear and radiant. Eirik's heart stirred, realizing no one else had ever seen her like this. He gently patted her head. I've got something urgent to take care of, but I'll be right back. Misha looked even more thrilled, and that excitement seemed to rub off on him too. But the next second, she suddenly sat up and threw herself into his arms. With short, hesitant phrases, she asked, So, more time, more talking? Getting to know each other. Mentally preparing. Does that mean it's time? Tomorrow? Realizing what she meant, Eirik scolded her for the first time. What are you saying? You're still hurt. How could you even think about that right now? What frustrated Eirik even more was that, despite being angry, he still couldn't tear his eyes away from her. Don't even think about it until you're fully healed. Yet even after saying that, he couldn't help glancing at her again. Misha's eyes were slightly red, her lips pouting. Great, now she was upset. Still, the issue needed to be addressed. Eirik asked, Why are you in such a rush to do that? After a pause, Misha finally spoke. I heard, you've never touched the princess. Are you planning to go to the temple and annul the marriage? By all logic, you should have dealt with her by now. Weren't you originally planning to marry Rakane? One by one, those familiar words, spoken by others in the past, now came from Misha's lips. And Eirik finally realized she had known all along, and cared deeply about everything he'd ever said. Misha, I am not going to annul our marriage. We're going to spend our lives together. That's why, we still have all the time in the world. There's no need to rush into something like that before we truly understand each other. Yet Misha still pouted slightly. Clearly, she didn't fully believe him. You're thinking weird thoughts again, aren't you? Eirik sighed. If there's anything you want to know, just ask me. Or, do you think I'm hiding something from you? You used to sit on my lap and read all kinds of documents, even the confidential ones. At this point, what secrets could I possibly keep from you? Eirik knew he couldn't push her too hard. Just rest for today, and if you can't fall asleep, do you want me to have some maids keep you company? Why? Misha looked puzzled by the sudden mention of maids. You're always in the maids' workroom, aren't you? You seem to be having fun with them. It wasn't fun, she said quietly. Then, why? The workroom is quiet. The maids talk a lot that I hear everything. Eirik paused, a realization dawning on him. So, you went there to gather information? Was that how you did things back in the palace too? Misha nodded enthusiastically. That's right. Do you know why the court earl's head is still attached to his shoulders? Do you know how much the chief maid of Namaria took from Malika's faction? I know all of that, and more. Ideals hated the white-haired butler for a long time. She's into the big brawny type. Misha's eyes sparkled mischievously, like she was sharing her collection of secrets. Eirik was completely floored by the gossip, especially coming from someone like her. Wait, are you saying, the butler likes Ideal, and she rejected him? But what shocked him even more was the realization that everything Misha had done until now had a purpose. Maybe, she's been more aware than any of us that he found himself moving closer to her, drawn in. Even his voice softened, filled with awe. Can I sit a little closer and talk with you? Misha looked at him with hopeful eyes. Was today finally the day they'd do it? But her hopes were immediately doused with cold water. Why did Lady Malika give money to Namaria's chief maid? Did she mess something up? Or was she trying to secure the position of your personal attendant? Disappointed, Misha turned away in a sulky huff. But with her straightforward personality, she was no match for him. You have to tell me, Eirik said gently. That's how we get closer, right? Reluctantly, she muttered a few words. See you tomorrow, sharp-faced Malika. Palace's 3 pillars. Eirik began piecing things together. The 3 pillars referred to the kingdom's 3 great noble houses. One of them, the king's maternal family, had been purged years ago. Since then it was a title in name only. He recalled how Ricane once approached him and said something strange, cryptic. And the one eavesdropping on that conversation had been Malika. Looks like the house she's trying to support is the Crisfin family. I need to send people to investigate both sides. Misha hadn't expected him to grasp the core issue so quickly. And then, a wild idea quietly bloomed in her heart. What if it's this man? Suddenly, a soft kiss landed on her cheek. She froze, hands flying up to cover her face as she turned to look at Eirik. His face was even redder than hers. It's your reward for answering my question. Misha stared blankly at him. If this reckless man truly was the one she hoped for, what should she do? The next morning, the newly appointed maid, Clara, was immediately targeted by Malika. What are you implying? That the ointment I brought is harmful to the lady's health? Who knows if you've poisoned it? How dare you apply it to the princess without permission? Clara was furious. This woman actually dared to come at her directly. Without hesitation, she scooped up a glob of the ointment, tossed it into her mouth, and swallowed it with a loud gulp. See? Perfectly fine. If you're still so worried, why don't you try some? Eirik chuckled softly. Choosing her had definitely been the right decision. He stepped toward Misha and spoke to her with a rare gentleness. My lady, I'll be back before noon. It won't take long. Get some rest in the meantime. Then, to everyone's shock, he turned and made his exit. I'm entrusting my wife to you all. In truth, he still couldn't quite understand Misha's behavior yesterday. Why would she go so far as to hurt herself just to keep up the act? Sure, it had helped suppress the palace maids for now, but could it have been part of her plan from the beginning? To figure out her true intentions, he needed to eliminate all the spies first. And after that, he would uncover everything she had suffered in the royal palace. Images kept flashing through Eirik's mind. In that moment, it was as if he had become a different person entirely. Soon he dumped the responsibility of training the knights onto Alberic. Do you have any idea how busy I am lately? Aside from chasing your woman, what else is keeping you so occupied? Alberic shot back, only to stammer when he hit a nerve. Enough. Starting tomorrow, you're in charge. Eirik had decided to stay away from night training duties, at least until Misha fully recovered. Meanwhile, he sent several knights skilled in stealth to follow Malika and the members of House Crisfin. Then he turned to Cullen. Go find Erdi and bring her here. And don't let my mother find out. Erdi had always been highly capable. Since Eirik was a child, their mother had appointed her as the chief maid. After reporting yesterday's incident to the palace alongside Malika, she cleverly obtained a handwritten copy of the official report from the court earl. However, if the new maid replacing Malika turned out to be just like the others, then none of it would matter. To intervene in the royal maid selection, Erdi was far more suited than Eirik. After all, she had always remained in the capital, maintaining ties with noble families and gathering intelligence behind the scenes. There was no one better suited to investigate Malika's bribery of Namanaya. And sure enough, Erdi quickly found a breakthrough. I heard Namanaya's closest confidant is Countess Marnal, and she's currently troubled by her younger brother-in-law's scandal. If we can solve that for her, she'll definitely throw her full support behind us. As promised, Eirik returned home before noon. The moment he opened the door, he saw Gralla painting with Misha. Gralla eagerly began listing everything the lady had done that morning. But Eirik's eyes were fixed only on his wife's adorable face. A gentle smile tugged at his lips without him realizing it. He leaned down and softly wiped the watercolor paint off Misha's cheek. Erik's words and actions toward the girl were so gentle that Gera was left completely dumbfounded. Suddenly, Eirik said, "That's enough for today, you can head back now." Seeing Gera still frozen in place, he urged again, "Didn't you say you were busy? Just come back tomorrow morning." Inwardly, Gera grumbled, "So now I'm supposed to be the doctor too?" Eirik raised an eyebrow. "Anything else you want to say?" Gera waved her hand. "No, then I'll see you two tomorrow." Once she found herself standing outside, she snapped back to her senses and fumed. What kind of nonsense is this? One paycheck for two jobs. If I'd known, I'd have just gone back to the village to treat patients instead. Cullen replied calmly, "You'll be getting two paychecks." Gera froze, then her face lit up. "Really? Well, then I have no complaints." Just then, Eirik suddenly flung the door open, startling Gera so much that she stumbled. Eirik asked, "Where are Madam's clothes for changing?" "Right, I still need to bathe her." "No need that I'm asking where the clothes are." "Under the shelf." But before she could finish, the door slammed shut with a bang. Only a faint thank you was left behind, as if it was just Gera's imagination. No, it wasn't. She had long grown used to the captain's way of speaking, straight to the point, but still, Cullen thought she was overreacting. Anyone who had once served as a commander carried that same habit. Gera shook her head and explained, "That's not what I meant. How should I put it? One moment he's stern-faced, the next he greets Madam with such a gentle tone. And what's wrong with showing respect to one's own wife?" Gera muttered under her breath. "But the captain clearly can't communicate properly with Madam." Then again, the way he looked at her. Gera sighed inwardly. "Forget it. There's nothing wrong with them being sweet together. It's me who's being presumptuous." Cullen glanced at her and said, "I've never really seen how the captain treats Madam, so I can't be sure. But he's always been a man of manners. Cold as he may seem, he's never treated us unfairly, has he?" "That's true. As long as nothing is hidden from him, there won't be any problems." "Exactly. The captain values honesty above all." Yet at that very moment, this man who prized courtesy and integrity was about to bathe his wife and even paint her. "So is the paint game fun?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, she dryly made a request. "No fairy tale books." Eirik turned his head toward her. "No what?" "Not those. I want adult books." "Fair enough. Reading something that helps you speak better should be more useful. Next time I'll have her bring you novels. Because novels are full of dialogue." Misha shyly turned her gaze away and added softly, "Also, that person lacks basic manners, so it's impossible to have a proper conversation." "Got it. I'll have her bring books that improve manners." Eirik spread his arms and said, "All right, let's go over there. The bathwater's ready." But to his surprise, the girl suddenly stepped back and dodged him. He looked puzzled. "Misha?" The girl's voice was soft and shy. "When I see your face, I feel uncomfortable." "You get shy just looking at my face. What's that supposed to mean?" Eirik pressed. Misha murmured, "When Eirik bathes me, my face turns red. It's too embarrassing. I want to wash myself." "Eirik, go out." She pointed at the door. "I'll wash on my own." "Eirik, leave." The man froze. "But your arm is injured. If you do it yourself." This time, Misha didn't answer, but the expression on her face clearly showed her displeasure. Eirik softened his tone. "Then how about this? I'll wash the paint off and finish your hair, then I'll leave. That's fine, right?" Misha reluctantly nodded in agreement. Eirik remarked, By the way, you don't seem to like answering much. He gently cleaned her fingers. From now on, try replying with simple words. Because whatever you do, only practice will make you better. The girl blushed, pulled her hand away and said, "Go out now. Can you manage on your own?" "It's fine, just leave now." Seeing her trying to act tough, Eric couldn't help but smile. "Alright, Dad, if you need anything, just call me anytime." But the moment he closed the door, a loud thud came from inside. Alarmed, he turned back, ready to rush in again. Soon after, however, the sound of running water followed. It was Misha's first attempt at bathing alone, and she was clearly unhappy. "This won't work. Tomorrow let Gara wash me instead. From tomorrow on, only let her handle it." Eric smiled with indulgence, thinking to himself, she even put her nightgown on backward. "Come here. Let me dry you properly." That night, he sat at her bedside, massaging her wrist while asking how she had spent the morning. "Girl, I like." "That's good." He noticed Misha's hands wrinkled from soaking in water and asked, "No inconvenience at the moment, right?" "No, it's fine. Didn't you say you liked meat?" "I've already told the kitchen. But why were you so frail before?" Misha thought about it, but explaining seemed too troublesome, so she began mimicking the way others spoke. "Oh please, why bother preparing food? Such a hassle. Whatever goes into the mouth never matches what piles up on the body anyway, so just toss me some leaves." "Maleta and Dylan, have they been your maids since the beginning?" "Yes. There used to be 5, now there are only 2. The atmosphere around Eric shifted, his tone sounded casual but underneath carried a chill. "I see. Their attitude toward you seems rather disdainful." Misha instantly picked up on his change in mood. "No. If they get hurt, Bedmi will find out." Bedmi, the name the king used before his ascension. The girl's body trembled slightly. Realizing she was afraid of him, Eric quickly changed the subject. "Anyway, it's only been a few days and already your speech has improved a lot. It could have been better, but I didn't get to practice." "Why not?" "Because I wanted to practice at night. But every time I got up, you ended up like this." She had no idea how many times she tried to sneak away, only to be unconsciously pulled back into Eric's arms each time. Blushing, he apologized and told her to practice without worry from now on. Misha tapped her forehead. "I spoke Dutso, what about here now?" Eric looked stunned but soon realized what the girl wanted. "What are you, an informant? Saying one sentence and already demanding a reward?" The girl didn't understand what an informant was, but from that moment on her speech grew more fluent, and the number of questions she asked multiplied. To his surprise, she often came up with the simplest of questions. "What does liar mean? And what about damn? How do girls my age usually live? And how do people see the king?" As their conversations multiplied, Misha's speech became far more fluent. She lifted her chin proudly. "Because these are all things I already knew how to say, things I've thought about in my head. I answered you, now kiss me, so how about speaking more politely from now on?" "Why? We're married, isn't it better to speak politely? But I'm of royal blood and the son of the Cladnir family is only a count. Why should I respect you then?" Eric laughed. "What should we do about that? Because you married me, you've now become a noble yourself. But why is that?" He explained the kingdom's law to her. Except for the king, when people of different ranks marry, the lower rank remains after marriage. Eric kissed the back of her hand softly. "Have I disappointed you?" "No, I love living here, so even if I become just like a noble, it doesn't matter." "That's good." Misha's focused eyes were irresistibly cute, and the way her small mouth carefully formed each word. Why hadn't he noticed before? His wife was so adorable and beautiful. Misha toyed with his hair. "You're kind, but I'm glad I saved you." Eric frowned. "What do you mean?" Misha explained. "When the king almost branded you a traitor, wasn't it me who saved your life?" Eric lowered his eyes. If they hadn't married, he wouldn't have faced such danger at all. Yet Misha's proud expression, her rosy cheeks and her chatterbox lips, made him think, so what if that's the case? Yes, he would still feel both heartache and gratitude. More than anything, what moved him most was her ever-changing expressions. "I've been happy since marrying you, truly." Because everything about her was just too lovable. He couldn't take his eyes off her. "This is when you should close your eyes," he urged. "Come on, hurry." The girl obediently shut her eyes. Eric gazed at her gently. Your lips are stiff. Relax a little. Unlike what Misha had been told by the priests, Eric's actions felt strange to her. There was nothing in her mouth to eat. So why was he so insistent? When Eric finally pulled back, he was met with Misha's expression, both shy and shocked. He couldn't help but laugh, then showered her forehead and cheeks with kisses again and again. Misha, does it feel strange? Yes, it feels strange. Wait. She pushed him away forcefully. That's not right. Do you even know what you're doing? Have you done this before? You haven't, have you? That's not how it's supposed to be. This has nothing to do with the upper body, do you understand? I learned from the priests before, so I know exactly what I'm saying. Eric caught Misha's flailing hands. I'm doing this to ease the pain you mentioned. But Misha was convinced she was right. No, you might be mistaken. Eric pressed her hands back down. You're always like this. If you keep it up, we won't be able to do anything. Misha turned her face away, still protesting. Don't be so stubborn that I'm doing this to save you. Hearing that it was for him, Eric's chest filled with overflowing joy. For me, that moves me so much. I guess I'll have to take more time because I don't want my dear wife to feel any pain. Misha struggled again. Why don't you get it? Eric replied. On this point, I truly empathize with you, madam, that I never thought we'd understand each other this way, that I'm really happy. The next morning, the plump maid and Malika were utterly confused. What's going on? Did they actually do it or not? In truth, Misha hadn't rested well. Eric had spent the entire night just kissing her. She never expected this man to be completely clueless in that regard. Just then, Gara walked in. Malika curled her lip. Oh my, the mistress is here. They had actually mistaken Gara for Eric's lover. Gara picked up some clothes, ready to help Misha change. But the sight before her made her freeze. What's going on? Is this a rash? Once she realized what it truly was, she let out a sharp scream. Meanwhile, the culprit himself, Eric, was listening to Eder's report. The palace had no intention of dismissing Malika. Worried that further probing would raise suspicion, she had to stop for now. Strangely, Malika didn't seem competent at all. According to the investigation, she was especially dishonest, and had even once been caught stealing valuables in the palace. In the end, she bribed the head maid to keep her position. Yet despite this, the king still insisted on keeping her. In short, because of Malika, even Viscountess Manhwa had started sending gifts to the head maid. Because the head maid was extremely extravagant, things progressed very smoothly. Here's the gift list. It records all the jewelry Malika gave to the head maid. Good work. Eric had just taken it, when Eder spoke up. Young master, how about taking a mistress instead and pulling back your attention from madam? Compared to Gara, who was about to lose her mind, Misha was calmly digging her little pits. What? Does that even make sense? Has the captain gone insane? Gara shook her fist. Madam, if you don't like the master, scratch him, bite him, hit him if you want. But seriously, who am I supposed to report this to? Seeing Gara like this made Misha a bit uneasy. But she had to keep up the act of being mad, and she couldn't tell Gara that she was willingly close to Eric. Gara felt like she was about to explode. No way, they're husband and wife. Who could possibly stop this? Looking at the innocent madam, Gara felt a pang of sorrow. Until now, she had always thought her own younger sister was the most pitiful person in the world. But at this moment, she wasn't so sure. I have a little sister like madam too. Her name's Tali. To be exact, I have 8 siblings. Families like ours always end up with many children. But one day, an epidemic spread through the village and Tali was left with a high fever. She became just like madam. My father was only a blacksmith's assistant back then. Honestly, how could someone like him afford to care for sick children? So one day he took Tali out, and when he returned, he was alone. It took me a long time to understand. Tali had gone somewhere she could never return from. Even though I was heartbroken, I had nowhere to say it. Because everyone would just say, who hasn't been through something like that? Misha listened intently to Gara's words. So hurting one's family is such a common thing. Another lesson learned today. After venting, Gara turned her head away in embarrassment. Before, I could only say these things to the horses in the stable or the dogs passing by. Madam, thank you for listening to my story. Misha thought to herself she used to be called a rat or a monkey all the time. But this time she had actually been compared to a horse and a dog. Strangely, her mood didn't feel all that bad. Gera fixed her gaze on Misha, speaking seriously. Madam, when I first saw you I clearly... Misha waited curiously for her to finish. But just then Eric walked in. He told Gera to head back first. Gera left, glancing back with worry at every step. Compared to seeing Eric, Misha wanted more to hear the rest of Gera's words. So when Eric brushed aside the strands of hair blown across her face, leaning in to kiss his wife, Misha blurted out, "You don't need to pick me up anymore." That left Eric completely stunned. "What do you mean? You don't like me picking you up?" "That's not it," Misha answered with a phrase she'd just learned today. "You're so busy, how could I take up your time? Besides, whenever I'm with you nobody else dares to say a word. But when I'm with Gera lots of people talk to her and I find that really fun." Eric fell silent. After a while he finally said, "That's true." Misha stared at him. Why did it feel like he wasn't in the best of moods? Then Eric continued, "If you only want to spend time with Gera, how about dressing a bit more formally? Even if it means changing clothes often, it doesn't matter. I've thought from the start it was too much. Why would they make you wear such cheap clothes? Is there a special reason? I'd prefer you dressed better." Of course there was a reason. If the Kladner family knew she was already unwanted, it wouldn't take long before they showed their true colors. Whether it was mistreating her or making her disappear entirely, to the king and his allies, either outcome would be convenient. After all, that would give them the perfect excuse to strike at the Kladner family. And the reason Malika kept calling her princess was only to stir up others' resentment toward her. But Misha didn't want to share any of this with Eric. "Tomorrow I'm going to dig under the Mizumu tree, so I don't want to wear new clothes." Lately, this man seemed especially wary of Malika and the plump maid. So Misha tried her best to avoid saying anything that might upset Eric. "All right then, I'll change into something softer. And from now on bring tools with you, stop digging with your bare hands." He never stopped her. He always respected whatever she chose to do. "You've gotten a little tan from playing in the sun, but you look healthy. When I first saw you, you were so pale and frail I worried about you. Now you've turned into a bit of a tomboy." This was the first time anyone had noticed the changes in her, and the first time she had come out in the daylight to smell the grass. All she wished for was that no one would take away this peaceful daily life. Footsteps sounded from behind. It was the gardener. Misha scrambled, burying her head back in the dirt, terrified of being noticed. Eric, meanwhile, checked with the gardener whether the bird nests had been cleared. Maybe because he had brought her a new kind of life, Eric's words sometimes struck her as quietly wondrous. The gardener looked as if he wanted to say something, but he left without saying a word. In a whisper Misha asked, "That man, every time I dig he frowns. Does he hate me for doing it?" Eric replied, "You dug so deep under the tree, of course a gardener wouldn't like that." Although Eric was always kind to her, on matters like this he answered plainly and decisively. "But if he speaks to you rudely, that's a different story." And Eric's words never made her feel hurt. "Then I'll punish him when the time comes." At that moment she even felt he was like a figure straight out of a fairy tale. A king full of mercy, justice, and wisdom. But that night Eric once again began doing those strange, unnecessary things to her. And softly asked, "Out of all the things I've done for you, which ones do you like?" I like it when you carry me around." Eric asked why, but Misha stubbornly refused to explain. So the man pushed her away. "You can take your time to answer. I'll wait." Misha grew upset. He was the one who asked which things she liked and she had answered honestly. But his desire to be close, she thought it was only to save their lives. Why did he keep tormenting her? "Because when I walk too long my legs cramp up. That's why I like it when you carry me." Why couldn't they just get straight to it? Their lives were at stake. What did all these questions matter? She recalled Malika's words after checking her body a few days ago. "Young Count, could it be that you've taken a lover and that's why your state of mind has changed?" Suddenly Misha threw herself at the man. "We're lovers, right?" Eric froze. "Lover? Isn't that just a special bond between a man and a woman? Isn't that what we are?" "No, we're not lovers. We're husband and wife." "Then if we're husband and wife, could you still have a lover?" Eric suddenly understood. "Did the maids feed you more strange ideas again?" "Yes, there are married people who take lovers, but I would never do that. Other than you, there will never be another woman by my side. And I want the same from you. Other than me, no other man." His brows furrowed. I truly can't understand. Failing to keep one's virtue is one thing, but the more important part, it's betrayal. Eric's grip on her arm grew tighter and tighter. Only when Misha cried out his name did the man finally come back to his senses. By the way you've been speaking lately, did you pick that up from Gara? She really did seem influenced by Gara. Probably. Is it that strange? Eric's lips curved into a smile. No, it's adorable. But in Misha's mind, all that really mattered was finishing their first night as soon as possible. After all, the priests had never mentioned all these odd, unnecessary steps. Yet somehow these little things always stirred countless tangled emotions inside her, leaving her unsettled. The next day the girl received a gift. The maids had embroidered a bib for her. Gara was even more delighted than she was. "Madam, you're so cute, like a little fairy." But in the distance, the head maid was watching them with a dark expression. Not long ago she had offered Eric a suggestion. "I don't believe blind loyalty to the master's household is the only form of true devotion. I think when the young master strays, it's appropriate to." Her words were cut off. "Just say it directly, don't beat around the bush. My lord, perhaps you could simply take a mistress and pull back your attention from Madame?" Eric stiffened, his tone turning icy. "A mistress? Sharing a bed with someone I don't even like, how is that loyalty?" "But young master, I truly don't understand. Ever since you handed the knights over to Alberic, you spend every day with Madame. What feelings can you possibly share with someone who can barely converse with you? Why give the collateral heirs who covet succession such an opening? And lately, all your focus has been on replacing the palace maids. Are those two women really that important? Isn't it because of Madame's poor management that she's been venting her frustration by digging up saplings in the courtyard? The master devotes all his energy to drinking women, while you spend yours on maids who bring no benefit at all. This situation makes me uneasy." Eric hadn't expected Eder to think this far ahead. "Didn't you say it yourself? There are still things about Malika we don't know." He turned to Cullen. "By spending time with my wife, have I really neglected that many duties? Aside from the knight's training, what else?" "Nothing. In fact, you even resolved the recent grain shortage. We handed over all the scrap iron spoils to Marquis Whitebar. He was delighted and granted us several years' worth of grain in return. After all, in his vast and fertile plains where agriculture thrives, iron is a scarce treasure. Besides, we have not only the Harlech iron mine but also 2 other mines. Even our own weapon forges can barely keep up with the repairs. And ever since Lord Alberic began knight training, the knights' confidence has actually declined. Because once they train, they can't help but compare themselves to you, Commander, and every single knight admits they fall short." Eric turned to Eder. "If you have more concerns, speak plainly. You're in charge of critical matters now. You can't afford to waver." Eder looked shaken as if struck down. "So, young master, you had already considered all this. It was presumptuous of me. A man once known for his rational judgment, in the very period when he was about to inherit the family estate, was willing to skip training just to stay by that woman's side. And the one who could sway the young master's judgment was a woman on the verge of madness. And not only the young master either. Eder had thought the lady merely pitted Misha. But at some point, whenever the lady faced matters involving her, she would lose all reason. Just like she once did with Miss Rogel. What was he supposed to do now? Whether it was the young master or the lady, both had fallen under Misha's spell. That night, Eric casually poured water onto the floor. Already practiced enough to erase traces on Misha's behalf. Suddenly the girl had a new thought. "I want to go outside and see." Gara blinked. "The book said the streets are crowded. Are you thinking of the commoner's quarter?" Catching the hesitation in his tone, Misha tried to persuade him in her own way. "The book also said shops have no courtyards in front, only rows of buildings pressed together. That's the commercial street." As the man hesitated, Misha's pleading eyes brimmed with hope. "Can't I? I want to see it." Her look struck Eric straight in the heart. The next day, the lady learned that Eric planned to take Misha into the city by carriage. Worried, she said, "If Misha just woke up, won't she feel uneasy going somewhere unfamiliar?" Eric reassured her, "As long as I'm with her, it'll be fine." Still uneasy, the lady suggested, "Take Gara with you. 2 people looking after her will be better than 1. Something unexpected might happen. Bring Gara along. Eric had intended to refuse, but then a thought crossed his mind. So he agreed. Yet as soon as they reached the commercial district, Eric told Gara to step down from the carriage and ordered her to return in 3 hours. Though pleased at the chance to rest, Gara still worried about Misha. Forced by Eric's insistence, she had no choice but to obey. I'll be back on time, she promised. Gara watched the carriage roll away uneasy. In her heart she prayed there shouldn't be any trouble. Right? Not long after, Eric pulled open the curtain of the carriage. Misha, you can sit up now. The girl sat up with delight, her crystal-like eyes shimmering with awe at the new sights. This is the busiest street. Just like Gara told you. So many people, isn't it? And up on that hillside, the white building, that's the grand temple where we held our wedding. Do you remember? No. Well, I suppose not. I had taken a sedative back then. Eric lowered his gaze, realizing that until now, she had never stepped outside while fully awake. Then take a good look. He lifted her gently, adjusting her into a more comfortable position on his lap. For him it was nothing unusual, but for Misha, it felt almost unbelievable. What kind of world is she seeing through her eyes right now? Though curious, he chose not to interrupt her. All the way the girl kept asking, "What's that?" "Those are mats for street stalls, though most of them are pretty low quality." Low quality? If even you think they're no good, how can people still use them? Eric gradually realized that Misha had a serious misunderstanding about their territory. She believed the Cardinal family had always been poor. In truth, it was the 12-year war. When the ceasefire came, thousands of soldiers returned all at once, and feeding over 17,000 men quickly became nearly impossible. Back then, Misha often sat on his lap, sneaking glances at the official documents. After a bit of thinking with her little head, she concluded that Cardinal isn't wealthy. Eric could hardly imagine a girl who barely knew the simplest words forcing herself to stare at such complicated reports. Still, since her mindset was shaped by life in the royal palace, and with the food shortage she saw, it was natural for her to think that way. So he patiently explained. The merchant guilds had also shrunk their trade because of the war, which lowered the tax revenue and created a temporary shortage. But that crisis had long been resolved. Everyone could now make a living, and once the harvest came this year, all problems would be swept away. Eric went on, "My parents dislike extravagance, so our estate has never been filled with luxuries. Still, we now have 3 iron mines in the territory, and the trade runs through the northern seaport. Not only that, the blue foxes that can only be hunted at the border, their pelts have become another major source of income." Mid-sentence, Eric suddenly froze. What was he even doing? He shook his head. Forget what I just said. Right now, he felt like some shallow man flaunting his wealth just to please his lover. Misha blinked in confusion. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing," he replied with a softer look. "Seems I just made you worry. Tell me, have you ever felt uncomfortable living in the manor?" Misha quickly shook her head. "No, never did. I only thought the manor didn't have enough food, so I left some of my snacks aside, and if I'd known otherwise, I would have eaten all of them." After hearing that, Eric quietly stepped off the carriage and instructed the coachman to guard the door. Under no circumstances was it to be opened. Realizing she hadn't eaten enough, Eric told her he was going to step out and get some food. "There should be a bakery nearby. I'll pick out a few things you like. Be good and wait for me." Only then did Misha realize their family wasn't poor at all. Thinking of her own silly assumption, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. After all, the only place she had truly lived in was the cramped Celia Palace. As for the central royal palace, she had only ever been dragged there against her will. And yet here she was, still holding on to her pride, even though her past treatment had been worse than that of livestock. Deep down, she still clung to the pride of being royal. Because if she didn't, then she truly had nothing left. Ironically, the peaceful life she longed for only came after she was no longer royal. She had never imagined that the marriage she once feared most would become the very source of her calm, ordinary days. Suddenly, a shout stirred chaos outside. "Look! That's the crest of House Cladnir." Startled, Misha yanked the carriage curtain shut. But the voices drifting in made her curiosity spark again. "He just went inside the shop. I didn't even get a good look. They say the young lord is really tall. This is the closest I've ever seen him. So, All these people were talking about Eric? I heard this is the first time he's shown up in the capital since he grew up. I knew it. With a face like that, of course word would spread. My sister married into a count's family, and she swore she saw him once on his wedding day. She said the young heir of House Cladnir isn't even on the same level as those so-called handsome nobles. Misha, however, misunderstood. Did they mean that man was so ugly everyone knew about it? The girls went on excitedly. In one phrase, an unmatched, peerless beauty. They say he's so handsome that anyone who sees his face can barely breathe. Misha blinked, realizing, oh, so everyone actually adored him. And I heard from my father. If he hadn't turned the tide at the critical moment, we would have lost the war. Another voice chimed in, exactly. If not for him, my hometown would have been nothing but flames. Only now did Misha clearly recognize who Eric truly was. He was the hero of victory. She finally understood why people cheered so wildly for him, and that the feeling shining on their faces was awe. But hey, did you know? What? Is that true? Of course. The royal wedding was so heavily guarded that none of us ever got a glimpse. So you're saying the young lord didn't even know the bride's condition when the wedding happened? That's just pitiful. Come on, who are we to pity the heir of such a powerful noble house? Forget it. Let's go get a look at his face. That he's coming this way. The moment the man appeared, Misha noticed two gloomy faces among the cheering crowd. To her, that kind of expression felt far more familiar. After all, the Eric she knew had always been the target of such looks. It was as if an invisible club had struck Misha hard on the head. Back inside the carriage, Eric's face showed not the slightest tremor. He was still as gentle and attentive as always. She should have been the one receiving the cheers and admiration, yet now it was because of her that he bore those hostile gazes. She hated to admit it. This marriage she cherished so deeply was for Eric a crushing tragedy. In that instant she felt he was pitiful. And when she realized it was all because of her, guilt pressed heavily on her chest. But if she felt guilty for ruining his life, then what about her own? Her entire life up to now, she had never once been treated as more than an insect. So then, who would ever feel sorry for her? Eric opened the pastry box. He didn't know much about sweets, so he just asked the shop to recommend a few. Supposedly in the southern regions they even put salted cream into egg tarts. Misha's voice suddenly turned unnatural. Are those Khalid's egg tarts? I think so. Only then did Eric notice something was wrong with his wife. Misha snapped her head away. I don't want them, don't even open the box. I don't like those pastries. Panic swirled inside her. Not only had she already ruined this man's life, now she was dismissing his sincerity. That he must be angry now. Yet Eric's voice remained steady. It seems something happened while I was gone. What was it? There it was again. Those eyes that looked as if they could see straight through her. Misha forced out a lie. I told you I don't like them. But suddenly the man seized her and turned her to face him. Be honest, that I don't care whether you eat them or not. What matters is, your attitude now is completely different from just a moment ago. So I'm asking you, what exactly happened while I was away? The walls the girl had built up over so many years began to crack. And through those cracks, fear spread like a flood. I haven't known you for long, but you're straightforward. And most of the time gentle. You'd never act without a reason. If there's something you can't bear to see, then there must be a reason behind it. Eric's words struck her one after another, shattering her already fragile defenses. It felt as if nothing about her could remain hidden anymore. Suddenly, Misha collapsed into unconsciousness. Not long after, the carriage rolled back into the central square. Eric still held her in the same position as before. As the stone-paved road jolted the carriage, he carefully shielded Misha's head. The girl finally regained her composure. A moment ago, in her panic, she had only pretended to faint. Misha fell into distress. Though they both held each other's lives in their hands, this man was the only one who knew her secret. By all logic, she should have been begging him to cooperate with her. Yet here she was, throwing a tantrum at such a moment. It seemed she had grown used to being treated like a real person these days, even developing useless emotions and pride. Like a fool, she had to learn to get along with this man. So she resolved that once they returned home, no matter what he asked, she would answer with a smile. She snuck a glance at Eric, only to be startled by the look on his face. She knew all too well that beneath everything, this man's nature was extremely stern. Yet lately, his gaze toward her had always carried a gentle warmth. Just as Misha began to feel uneasy, Gera returned. She froze for a moment. The carriage was dim, and as she stepped in with doubt, she asked, "Why haven't you two opened the curtains?" Eric let out a quiet sigh. In that instant he sensed something. Through a slit in the curtain, he caught sight of figures darting swiftly across the rooftops. His eyes turned sharp in an instant. When they finally arrived back at the estate, they happened to run into the Count, who was just leaving. Though father and son, they looked at each other as if they were strangers. "Are you going there again today?" At that moment, Eric recalled Adil's words. As he stepped down from the carriage, intending to greet his father, the Count's carriage was already rolling away. Was he not even going to acknowledge him anymore? At times, Eric felt as though the family crest itself was pressing down on him. From childhood, he had been taught that every decision must be made with reason and correctness. Yet had his father, as head of the house, ever truly fulfilled that duty? Thinking back, even Adil's words weren't entirely wrong. Some rotten parts did need to be cut away. "Young master, I noticed a box from a high-end pastry shop in the carriage. Should I bring it out?" "Take it for yourself. Now hand the lady over to me. Also, do you know how to use a short sword or anything similar?" Gera felt she should say no, but she couldn't lie to the captain. So she admitted honestly, "Yes, as long as it can be cut, I'm skilled with it." Eric simply replied, "Good," then carried Misha back inside. Gera was left standing there in a haze of confusion. From the upstairs window, two silhouettes appeared faintly. It was Malika and the plump maid. Oddly enough, they didn't look like lovers at all. The plump maid scoffed, "Maybe that's just the kind of woman he likes. Look, he even went out of his way to prepare a secret gift for her." Malika's eyes still carried doubt. "Doesn't matter. If she's not his lover, then why not make her one?" Back in the room, Eric carefully laid Misha down on the bed. He stared at her, lost in thought. Then he reached out and called softly, "Misha?" The moment he touched her, Misha jolted awake, her eyes filled with fear. Eric whispered, "Sorry, you really were asleep this time, huh? Don't worry, just keep resting. I'll wake you once dinner is ready." Misha realized his attitude hadn't changed at all, still as gentle as ever. Tentatively, she gathered her courage and grasped his hand. "Eric, are you mad at me?" Knowing he liked hearing about her past, she spoke softly. "Actually, my mother. She was from the southern region of Haladaso about earlier. I'm sorry." Eric had long ago sent people to investigate Misha, but her mother's origins remained untraceable. Misha's mother had been the last queen consort of the late king. Unlike the other consorts, she was only the daughter of a common family. Sadly, not long after giving birth to Misha, the king passed away. From that moment, the third consort became like a kite with its string cut, drifting helplessly. She raised the newborn Misha in the Celia Palace, surrounded by deathly silence. Until the day Bellamur devoured the Saladike family, and blood painted the royal palace. That was why so little information remained about the third consort. He asked, "So, do you hate everything from that region?" "Yes." Eric finally let out a breath, realizing he had been doing something pointless. "That's why I want you to tell me about yourself. What you like and what you dislike. Sharing those things with me will be good for you too, because it means fewer mistakes on my part." Misha obediently rubbed her cheek against his palm, just when she thought she had slipped past his doubts. Eric's tone shifted. "Anyway, thank you for being honest with me. But aside from that, something else happened today, didn't it?" At those words, the girl's face stiffened with fear, her eyes darting away. "It was only because of what I said earlier." "Really?" Eric sighed again. Today he had sighed more because of her than he had in the entire past year. And at the same moment, the girl was already letting out a faint snore. Eric was stunned. Was she pretending to sleep again? Deep down, he had already known that Misha wouldn't let down her guard overnight. So even if she wasn't ready to open her heart to him, it didn't matter. Still, something felt off. He had noticed Misha had a strong tendency to avoid things. The memories buried deep inside her. She seemed determined to ignore them without even realizing it herself. What happened in the carriage could very well have been a warning sign. Eric had witnessed countless deaths on the battlefield, and even seasoned soldiers often broke down in an instant, plagued by trauma. Yet Misha's calmness these days sometimes felt unnatural. Because she occasionally acted spoiled and mischievous, he had brushed it aside. But who could say? One day all those emotions she had bottled up might explode at once. After that day, however, their relationship quickly returned to a facade of normalcy. Every night before bed, the girl would tell him what she liked to eat, and the next morning he'd have the kitchen prepare it. Over the past few days they had talked a lot, but nothing truly special. She blinked up at him, eyes full of anticipation. Eric brushed a fleeting, dragonfly-like kiss across her forehead. She would even volunteer stories of her day, chattering like a little bird. Yet Eric couldn't figure out how to quiet the turmoil inside him. Misha pouted a little. Was that all? For the first time, this man had developed feelings for a woman, and the chaos of it made him retreat. That's it. You have nothing else to say to me? All this small talk? You could have it with a stranger too. To Eric, even if she threw a tantrum or smashed things, it didn't matter. He was her husband and it was his duty to protect her. The real issue was that he didn't know what this uncontrollable, unfamiliar feeling might lead to, and so he kept trying to draw a line. Misha seemed to sense the shift in his mood. She answered timidly, I don't know what people talk about with strangers. And I don't know what I'm supposed to say in situations like this. Because you're the only one I can talk to. Her expression was a mix of grievance and embarrassment. In that moment, Eric felt like a fool. What was he even worrying about? This was a girl who still got nervous just speaking. How about telling me what happened on our last trip out? I didn't press you then because you didn't seem ready. I know that whenever you think about what you've been through, you spiral into tangled, exhausting emotions. And I think the fact you can't hide those feelings from me is actually a good thing. Up until now, you've hidden yourself perfectly from everyone else. At last, Misha voiced the question that had haunted her for so long. Why are you so good to me? Because you're now a member of the clan of Cladnir, and there are other reasons too, but I'm not ready to say them yet. A member of the clan? Yes. Which means we're family. So, my lady, you can throw tantrums with me, and you can tell me whatever's in your heart, it's all right. But there are two things I ask of you. Honesty, because it's vital. And remember, from now on we'll be on the same side. So I hope you can be like me as well. Misha suddenly leaned closer. I think you're right. After all, their bond was one where each held the other's life in their hands. Eric couldn't help but smile at her earnest look. Maybe what I mean and what you understand aren't the same right now, but I believe one day our thoughts will align. You must be tired. Rest early tonight. With her sense of safety restored, drowsiness washed over her. Eric hadn't held her like this in so long. Every time she could feel the sincerity in his embrace. He could have just treated her kindly on the surface, but perhaps his heart itself was truly warm. The next day, Eric took her out again with the lady of the house personally seeing them off. Misha, enjoy your outing today as well. Adiel's expression was grave. Once the carriage was out of sight, she finally spoke up. Is it really fine to just let things go like this? After all, the young master is still a man, keeping a young woman by his side all the time, won't it? What are you saying? Instead of that kind of woman, wouldn't it be better to find a maid for the young lady from a proper family? So she was talking about Gara. The lady chuckled. Really now, you've seen how Eric interacts with the doctor and you still worry about this? Besides, his wife is Misha. No matter who else is around him, none of them can enter his heart. That you've seen it yourselves, haven't you? Misha's gotten a bit chubbier lately. So cute, though she's still a little too thin. She glanced at the maid beside her. Go to the kitchen and find out what Misha likes to eat. Adiel still couldn't understand why both mother and son were so attached to that woman. That night, Eric worked alone in his study. Malika showed up at the pawn shop today. After lying low for a while, it looked like she was about to make another move. Yet there was still no word from Crispin's side. Just then the door to the study swung open. To his surprise, it was Misha who had come to find him. Despite the endless matters weighing on his mind, the moment he saw her at the doorway, he pushed everything aside. You can't sleep. Do you want to sit on my lap like before? A single no made him freeze on the spot. Standing at the threshold as if ready to bolt at any moment, the girl locked eyes with him. Let's talk right here. All right, go ahead, he said. I thought about it carefully. I don't hate you anymore. Eric felt as though lightning had struck him. He stood there stunned for several seconds before reacting. His voice was full of disbelief. So you've been hating me all this time? Misha didn't deny it. I don't hate you anymore. The moment the words left her mouth, Eric shot to his feet. He strode toward her. So you really thought it over and finally realized you don't hate me? The girl instinctively stepped back, her voice shrinking. Are you angry, Eric? Seeing her startled, the man who'd been flushed with emotion instantly calmed down. No, I'm not angry. Eric caught her hand as if afraid she'd run off a second later. Come on, tell me, why did you hate me before? Does it make you uncomfortable when I touch you like this? Misha thought for a moment. No. Eric finally let out the breath he'd been holding, his tone laced with helplessness. Even such a simple question takes her so long to answer, he thought. Good thing that last time when she asked why I treat her well, my answer was perfect. Otherwise it could have ended in disaster. The girl frowned slightly. I don't feel uncomfortable, that I just think this isn't necessary. Is that so? Well, it's normal for you to think that. The usually straight-laced man was now, surprisingly, coaxing his wife. But I'm glad you don't hate me, that it doesn't make you uncomfortable. Thank you for realizing that and telling me right away. Misha's cheeks flushed at his praise, the corners of her lips curling upward despite herself. It's nothing. He felt like he was finally starting to understand her. But Eric, what exactly are you doing? She tilted her head toward his desk. Nothing. Just needed to check something. Seeing the curiosity in her eyes, the man offered, You can take a look if you'd like. Really? The moment she asked, Misha hurried over with quick, eager steps. But the stack of files on the left, those can't be torn. Of course that I don't rip things up anymore. Soon Eric noticed something else. Misha read with astonishing speed, and with unwavering focus. It was the first time he'd ever seen her go through documents. Compared to speaking, she seemed far more adept at reading. Did you send someone to follow Malika? Yes. For a brief moment he thought he saw her frown. The girl pointed at a line in the papers. It says here, what about the Salakady family? Isn't that house already meaningless? One of the last lord's illegitimate sons is still alive. And word is he's about to inherit the family name. The girl would occasionally ask questions she didn't understand, and Eric answered them all honestly. After all, he was the one who'd insisted on keeping their promises. In just a moment she finished reading the entire stack of papers. If I want to read more, will you let me next time too? Of course. Anytime you like. Do you still have work to do? Yes. He really did have things left to handle. But the girl wasn't shy about it. I want to sit on your lap. All right. Eric steadied her as she sat down. His deep, magnetic voice said something almost dull. There's nothing here you'd find interesting. To Misha, that wasn't a problem at all. This little cat was about to start misbehaving again. It's fine. But Eric, is kissing only something you're supposed to do in the bedroom? I was just thinking. I don't think it's just that I don't dislike you anymore, that I think I'm starting to like you. As she leaned closer, her sweet voice brushed nearer to his ear. So, can we? The teasing atmosphere suddenly froze. Eric pressed a finger under her chin and gently pushed her back. He tapped the corner of her lips with slight pressure. What are you trying this time? Then he lowered the hands that had been holding her. Misha fell back like a fish laid helpless on the chopping block. Your acting is terrible right now, so this time just tell me the truth. Her upper body dangled in the air, arms flailing as she tried to grab him and push herself up. But no matter how she struggled, she couldn't move an inch. His deep voice carried a strict edge. So this time, speak honestly. What exactly have you been thinking about lately that made you act like this? Nervous, Misha muttered. What do you mean? I just made this big discovery and rushed to tell you. I only wanted a reward like we agreed. Yes, those words really do matter. And with that he kissed her.